Takudo was a terminally ill boy who reincarnated into the world of his favorite game after his death, alongside his favorite game character. Together, they decide to build an empire, just like they did in the game. However, neither of them knows that Takudo has been reborn as the legendary King of Ruin, destined to destroy the world to bring about its rebirth. In his previous life, Takudo spent most of his time playing a civilization-building strategy game called Eternal Nations. One day, just as he restarts the game after completing everything, he quietly passes away. As he sinks into darkness, he suddenly opens his eyes to find himself sitting on a stone throne in the middle of a forest. Confused, he wonders what's happening until a familiar figure appears before him. Takudo instantly recognizes the woman as Atao, the sludge witch, his favorite character from Eternal Nations. He recalls that he had challenged himself by playing the game on its hardest difficulty, starting with the Kingdom of Ruin and Evil, known as Minora. Fortunately, that kingdom included Atao, a character initially weak but capable of absorbing the abilities of her defeated enemies to become the strongest by the end. Atao addresses Takudo as her king, leading him to wonder if this is some kind of roleplay. However, Atao reassures him, saying there's no need to overthink things because she already knows everything: his name, his history, and the fact that he was a hardcore player who completed the game on nightmare difficulty with the most challenging civilization. Takudo is stunned that she knows about his status as a player and her existence as a character from the game. She even remembers all their games together, his playstyle, his strategies, and all the times he called out to her through the screen. Overjoyed that he can now speak to his favorite character in person, Takudo asks if this is heaven and whether she summoned him here. But Atao reveals that she herself was summoned to this world and suspects that it resembles Eternal Nations. She then kneels before Takudo, holds his hand, and declares that since they're together, it doesn't matter where they are, they should build a civilization just for themselves once more. Encouraged, Takudo accepts the idea, asking Atao to serve him in creating a glorious civilization. She happily agrees, playfully acting like a badass witch and pledging her loyalty. Both of them laugh awkwardly at their overly dramatic exchange. Takudo then mentions that she already knows the first rule of Minora, to become shut-ins and hide their existence from the world. Next, Takudo uses his emergency skill to summon a giant insect scout to survey the surrounding area. They discuss how secrecy is essential in the early game, and scouts like this help gather intelligence without exposing themselves. Takudo shares that he can view the scout's perspective just like in the game, but it cost him half his mana to create. Ideally, he would summon a fighter for protection, but his mana is insufficient for that right now. Atao feels disheartened because she's currently too weak to protect herself, let alone her king. As the scout explores, Takudo observes nothing but forest. Atao laments her helplessness, but Takudo assures her that her presence alone is enough, which makes her immensely happy. Suddenly, the scout encounters a group of weary and starving dark elves. Atao sees this as good news, explaining that dark elves are a neutral species, slightly inclined toward neutral evil, and that their kingdom's alignment is also Loki neutral evil. However, this discovery troubles Takudo, who begins to question whether this is truly the world of Eternal Nations. He worries that if another civilization is nearby, his fledgling kingdom might be destroyed quickly. But Atao comforts him, promising that if danger arises, they'll escape together. Takudo agrees and decides to keep monitoring the Dark Elves while continuing his scouting. While they joke around, the group of Dark Elves unexpectedly arrives. Both parties are equally shocked to see each other. Atao prepares to risk her life to protect her master if necessary. The Dark Elves' leader, Jia, was on a mission to find food for his starving people. His assistant had warned him against entering the forest, citing legends about a great evil sealed within. But Jia, determined to save his people, pressed on, only to encounter Takudo and Atao, whom he perceives as avatars of evil. In his eyes, Takudo appears as a shadowy silhouette, confirming the terrifying legends. Fearing for his people, Jia quickly kneels before Takudo and introduces himself, with his followers doing the same. He apologizes for trespassing. Atao puts on a tough front, calling it wise of them to know their place. She bluntly asks why the Dark Elves have come, prompting Jia to hurriedly explain their plight. Atao, growing impatient, urges him to get to the point, intimidating him further. Jia reveals that his clan was unjustly banished by the council and remains persecuted. They were forced into these cursed lands for safety, but their food supply ran out a week ago, and now they are on the brink of starvation. When Takudo asks if they've endured great hardships, Jia freezes with fear, but Atao commands him to answer. He explains that his people only wish to live in peace, yet they suffered greatly, leading them to this desperate situation. Jia wonders whether Takudo will be cruel to them as well, but to his surprise, Takudo throws some apples at him, telling him to try them because they're delicious. Jia has never seen apples before and is hesitant, but his followers lack his patience. They eagerly devour the apples, exclaiming how sweet they are. Then, Takudo suddenly creates some pears, leaving Jia completely stunned. Atao scolds Jia, asking why he isn't eating the fruits that her master has so graciously provided. Bowing before Takudo, Jia explains that many in his tribe are starving, especially the children, and he wishes to feed them first. Moved by pity, Takudo begins summoning a massive amount of food, shocking both Atao and Jia. As a dark elf, Jia had always faced discrimination, with others assuming his people belonged to the dark side. No one had ever shown them such kindness. Overwhelmed, Jia asks who Takudo really is, but Takudo simply tells him to take the food back to his people. Jia and his followers return to their camp, where their tribe finally eats to their heart's content. Yet, Jia chooses not to reveal how he obtained the food. That night, as he sits alone by the campfire, the clan elder, Moltar, approaches. He remarks that the fruits Jia brought were unlike anything he had seen in his long life, more delicious than any fruit before. He questions Jia about their origin, prompting Jia to recount his encounter with a legendary evil being. Moltar is shocked, recognizing the description as that of the King of Ruin mentioned in ancient texts. According to the books, when the world grows overfilled, the King of Ruin will appear to destroy it, allowing for a new beginning. Jia feels Takudo fits this description. Though he admits he couldn't understand much of what Takudo said, he merely picked up hints from Atao's behavior. Skeptical, Moltar asks if Jia offered anything in return for the food. When Jia says no, Moltar warns that no evil being would show mercy without expecting something in exchange. Yet, Jia insists that Takudo showed genuine compassion, which irritates Moltar. However, after some debate, Moltar acknowledges that Jia did his best to provide for their people. He then declares that, as the clan's senior, he will negotiate directly with the Dark King in hopes of securing the peaceful life they've always desired. Meanwhile, Atao scolds Takudo for wasting his mana on creating food when his reserves are low. But when Takudo gently tells her not to be upset because he needs her, she quickly softens and acts tsundere again. The next day, Jia prepares to visit Takudo again. Moltar asks if he is ready to face the king, cautioning that since they've accepted charity from the Dark King, they must be prepared to pay any price demanded. Jia objects, claiming Takudo never mentioned any price, but Moltar retorts that it's natural for evil beings to ask for compensation for their deeds. Nevertheless, he agrees that their survival depends on Takudo, as no other place is safe. Unbeknownst to them, Takudo's insect scout has been monitoring them the entire time. He recalls the scout N, upon learning that the elves are on their way, nervously hopes they'll simply take the food he prepared and leave quietly. Admitting that he struggles to communicate well, he asks Atao to handle the negotiations to maintain the image that the king doesn't speak directly to lesser beings. Soon, Moltar and Jia arrive. The old elf greets Takudo with a formal salutation, thanking him for the food. He asks for the name of their benefactor, and with Takudo's permission, Atao introduces him as the King of Ruin. Both dark elves are shocked, their fears seemingly confirmed. Atao bluntly tells them to take the food and leave, as it won't last long anyway. However, Moltar insists on repaying Takudo's kindness, asking what they can offer in return. Atao scoffs, saying they probably have nothing of value worthy of satisfying her king. When she challenges them on whether they possess anything of worth, Moltar hesitates, ashamed that they have nothing left. Seeing his hesitation, Atao glares menacingly and accuses him of plotting something. Moltar panics and Takudo realizes that the negotiation is spiraling downward. He pulls Atao aside to discuss a new strategy. She gets annoyed, accusing Takudo of being too soft and warning that these losers will become obstacles. She even suggests killing them and placing their heads on pikes around their base, but Takudo rebukes her, joking that she's acting like that one Austrian painter. He argues that the elves just want to coexist peacefully and are offering repayment out of gratitude. Instead of giving them food for free, he proposes they establish a system where the elves pay in a manner they can manage, which would foster a healthier relationship. Though reluctant, Atao concedes and informs the elves that her king has decided to accept their offerings. Seeing the relief on Molter's face, both Takudo and Atao realize he had been extremely nervous because he viewed Takudo as a typical evil being. Atao scolds him for that assumption, but then gets confused about what they should ask in return for the food. Suddenly, Takudo gets an idea and tells her to ask the elves for information about the outside world. Moltar is overjoyed and swears to tell Takudo everything he has seen and heard about the world beyond the forest. Atao then states that once he fulfills this, his tribe must leave the forest immediately, which shocks both Jia and Molter. They plead to stay under Takudo's protection, but Atao warns them not to be greedy if they want to live. Jia tries to argue, but Moltar silences him, insisting they must obey the king's command. As the elves prepare to leave, Takudo feels guilty about driving them away. On a sudden impulse, he stops them and offers Moltar and Jia the chance to become his citizens. Both are stunned, but no one is more shocked than Atao, who demands to know what he's doing. Takudo reminds her of the refugee system from the game, which allows them to incorporate other species as citizens. Since dark elves are neutral aligned, they can adapt to Minora's evil attribute and coexist with other species in the kingdom. Atao remains skeptical, noting that evil-aligned species often fight amongst themselves. But Takudo points out that their main species, the homunculi, are unsettling creatures, human-like beings pieced together poorly, and they can't spend all their time with such eerie beings. As soon as the image of the homunculi flashes in her mind, Atao immediately agrees. Turning to the elves, she explains that Takudo plans to build a kingdom here and is willing to accept them as citizens if they pledge their loyalty. Moltar asks what that entails, and Atao bluntly tells him they'll become evil beings, but assures them it's more fun than they might think. Soon after, Takudo and Atao visit the Dark Elf settlement, where everyone is terrified of Takudo, some faint just from seeing him. Taking his throne, with Atao at his side, she declares that the Dark Elves will now be citizens of Minora. She checks with Takudo one last time, and upon his approval, the elves are officially integrated into his kingdom. Atao congratulates them, telling them that their survival and safety are now guaranteed by their king. Jia, however, wonders aloud if that's all, since he doesn't feel any different after becoming an evil being. But the moment he speaks, a surge of hatred wells up inside him, and the others directed toward those who hurt and persecuted their kind. The two normal elves with them watch on in concern. Seeing their struggle, Takudo asks if they are alright. Jia is moved to tears, realizing that someone finally cares for him and his people. The Dark Elves cheer for Takudo, tears streaming down their faces, while Takudo feels a bit overwhelmed. A few days later, Takudo receives a map of the continent from Molter, and he immediately collapses in despair upon seeing it. Atao asks what's wrong, and he tells her to look. Their starting position is terrible. They are on a continent already occupied by two massive and powerful civilizations. The Holy Kingdom of Qualia, a human nation worshipping the god Arlis, known for their hardcore good alignment, and Elnan, an alliance of elementals and elves devoted to nature, also aligned with the good side. Atao panics, realizing that if either of these civilizations discovers them, they'll be wiped out instantly. She collapses alongside Takudo, but he manages to calm down, reasoning that as long as they remain hidden, they can grow stronger. In the game, their primary species, the homunculi, were too dumb to conduct meaningful research. But with the Dark Elves on their side, things might improve. Soon, the Dark Elves visit Takudo again, this time with Jia introducing his assistant, Emily, a knowledgeable and scholarly elf familiar with other kingdoms. Atao praises their dedication and declares that from now on, they'll have important responsibilities, because that's what Takudo wants. First, she appoints Moltar as the head of internal affairs, noting that she has high hopes for him, especially since he knows magic. Then she names Jia the head warrior of Minora, tasking him with building a strong army. Recruitment is left entirely up to him, and Jia eagerly boasts that he'll slay their enemies and display their heads as trophies. Takudo, however, is already grossed out by the idea, prompting Atao to clarify that their king prefers peace. Jia is left baffled. Why would the King of Ruin value peace? Moltar teases Jia, claiming that unlike him, he has brains rather than just brawn. This sparks a playful rivalry, with Jia declaring that since he is young and strong, he can work harder without rest. Atao is oblivious to their competition, assuming they're just diligent workers. She asks Takudo whether, they should assign them resource-gathering tasks, and he suggests beautifying the land and constructing homes. Atau relays the orders to Moltar, instructing him to gather timber while preserving most of the forest. Moltar agrees enthusiastically, pointing out that dark elves are natural forest dwellers. Takudo also instructs them to reforest any cleared areas, but the elves are confused by the term. Realizing that their civilization is not advanced enough to understand reforestation, Takudo asks if they know about military magic are the 6 major elements. Moltar admits he only knows the 4 major elements, and Emily says she's never heard of any country using military magic. This surprises Takudo and Atau, making them realize that this world is much more primitive than they initially thought. Though Takudo and Atau find this world primitive, they realize it's actually a good thing. Once they advance their magical technology, they can quickly surpass other nations. Atau explains to the elves that reforesting means growing new trees to replace the ones they cut, and the dark elves admit they do this too. But without magic, it takes time. Atau proudly claims that reforesting uses the 6 major elements to grow trees rapidly, and despite it being a blatant lie, she credits the method to Takudo. She continues praising Takudo, reminding everyone that he created the unique fruits they ate earlier, and casually mentions that grapes are her favorite. Emler agrees with Atau, sharing that she planted some grape seeds, and surprisingly, a few plants have already sprouted. This surprises Takudo, who hadn't expected anything to grow in this environment. But then a thought strikes him. Since he can magically create fruits from earth, perhaps he can create other things as well. Testing this, Takudo conjures a coin and realizes he can produce gunpowder and other scientific materials too. This means he can propel their civilization's advancement far beyond others. Meanwhile, over in the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, trouble is stirring. Saint Selena leads a band of knights to snowy foothills to eliminate monsters threatening nearby villages. When goblins charge at her, she raises her staff and incinerates them with her holy flame, which ascends into the sky and disperses in the clouds. Where the flames scorch the earth, flowers bloom, enchanting the knights. The knight captain explains that Selena's powers not only burn evil, but also create flower fields, which is why they have a strong alliance with the elves. Afterward, Selena advises the cardinal to send paladins southward because she recently foresaw a bad omen regarding the cursed forest. The cardinal refuses, citing that the forest is too far and he needs higher authorization to deploy paladins. Selena threatens to go herself, forcing the cardinal to relent and promise to send the troops he personally commands. Back in Minora, Takudo and Atau focus on developing their territory, beginning with building houses for the Dark Elves. A temporary throne room is already built around Takudo's throne, and he eagerly looks forward to hosting meetings with his key subjects. Soon, Moltar, Gia, and Emil arrive, prompting Atau to suggest holding their first council meeting. Before they begin, Emil presents a gift to Takudo, an outfit that ends up making him look quite feminine. Regardless, Takudo appreciates it, grateful since his old clothes were getting filthy. The elves don't notice any change in his appearance, but they trust Atau when she insists he looks great in it. With formalities done, Atau initiates the council meeting, but Takudo is too busy admiring himself to pay attention. Atau shrugs and decides to proceed, consulting Takudo only when necessary. He's completely fine with that arrangement. The meeting begins with Moltar asking what buildings they should prioritize. Atau responds that food production should come first, then reveals a creepy-looking plant, designated as their primary food source for now. The elves are visibly repulsed and ask what it is, so Atau explains it's the flesh plant, unique to their civilization, capable of producing meat that tastes like human flesh and is highly nutritious. Disturbed, the elves protest that they don't eat humans, but Atau reassures them that the flesh plant is a temporary measure. They'll diversify their food supplies soon. She adds that they also need storage facilities and management sheds. Emily volunteers to handle that task. Atau then shifts focus to research, vital for small nations like theirs to survive and thrive. Moltar asks what they should study, and Atau instructs them to develop magic technology. Takudo is visibly excited, and Moltar, being a mage, vows to impress him. Moltar asks for clarification, so Atau elaborates. They'll research military magic. While conventional magic targets a few enemies at once, military magic can obliterate entire cities and reshape the terrain for tactical advantage. She orders Moltar to gather talented mages among the elves and start immediately. Fired up, Moltar is eager to craft magic that doesn't exist yet. Next, Atao raises the topic of military strategy, which excites Jia since it's his domain. But Takudo immediately intervenes, stating they won't heavily invest in the military just yet. Atao explains that armies are costly to maintain and unproductive during peacetime. Jia counters that their current forces are too weak to defend Takudo, and Moltar agrees, noting that both he and Jia have bounties on their heads, making them targets. Understanding their concerns, Takudo decides to create a hero instead. Atao agrees, explaining that although summoning a hero is expensive, they require no upkeep, ideal for their current situation. The elves are unfamiliar with the concept, so Atao describes heroes as powerful beings who directly serve the king. There are specific conditions for summoning each hero, but she is confident they'll meet them soon. Takudo reflects that mana is the key to everything in this world, and a kingdom gathers mana from its citizens. The happier they are, the more mana is collected. Determined, Takudo vows to make Minora the happiest kingdom on the continent. Meanwhile, back in the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, a junior paladin named Lonius is chosen for the investigation team, heading to the Cursed Forest. A senior paladin named Vertil accompanies Lonius on the expedition, and his favorite pastime is teasing Lonius, who is strict and overly formal. Vertil grumbles that the church is sending an awfully small investigation team, just 2 paladins and a handful of mercenaries. He believes the church should take Selena's prophecy more seriously. Lonius agrees, but admits they have no way of knowing what the higher-ups are thinking. He knows that if the mission succeeds, they'll be handsomely rewarded, but if they fail, all the blame will certainly land on him. Meanwhile, back in Minora, Takudo inspects the progress of his growing civilization. He feels nostalgic, having watched this phase countless times on screen during the game, but now he's experiencing it firsthand. Emily gives him a tour, proudly explaining that dark elves are skilled at building houses on trees. However, construction is slow for now because they're focusing their efforts on cultivating the flesh trees. She adds that the trees are thriving and the storage and management facilities are complete. Emily also reveals that the elves discovered a freshwater spring nearby and are testing if they can draw water from it. As for magic research, Moltar and the other mages are diligently working in the newly established research building. Takudo is pleased, especially to see that the elves, who once looked so exhausted, now appear happy and lively. When he points this out to Emily, she bursts into tears of joy, which flusters Takudo, though she quickly regains her composure and resumes the tour. Next, she takes Takudo and Atao to the flesh tree farm and proudly says that thanks to the tools Takudo provided, their first harvest is expected soon. Then she guides them to the water source, but immediately notices that the atmosphere around the place feels different, dark, and ominous. The water itself has turned black, and Emily is disappointed, assuming it's now unusable. Before Atao can explain, Moltar and Jia arrive to inspect the site. Both agree that the water seems tainted, but Atao confidently takes a sip, declaring it perfectly safe. She then explains that the area has become part of Minora's cursed terrain, a feature that alters the environment. Takudo urges the elves to take a deep breath, and they suddenly feel their minds clearing and their bodies energized. Atao clarifies that cursed terrain benefits beings with an evil alignment and weakens neutral and good beings. Since the dark elves are now evil-aligned, the water is harmless to them. To confirm, Jia drinks it himself and finds no issue. Atao further reveals that soon the entire forest will be absorbed into this terrain. However, Takudo points out a drawback: the ominous appearance of the cursed terrain makes their location too obvious. Moltar agrees, noting that if the whole forest turns dark, enemies will easily discover them. As usual, Jia suggests they form an army, but Atao and Takudo reassure him that summoning a hero is their priority. Moltar, still unclear on what a hero is, prompts Atao to demonstrate. Suddenly, dark tentacles sprout from Atao's back, effortlessly slicing through nearby trees. She reveals that she herself is a hero, and despite having only 1% of her original power, she could still annihilate entire armies. Takudo proudly explains to the amazed elves that heroes grow stronger over time, even without doing anything. He then scolds Atao for cutting down the trees unnecessarily and tells her to clean up the mess later. The elves, however, are thoroughly impressed and declare that a king with such powerful subordinates deserves a grand palace. Though Takudo dismisses the need for a palace, saying it's unnecessary for now, the elves insist they refuse to let their king live in the same houses as them. Atao also supports the idea, adding that building a palace would boost the people's morale. Finally, Takuto agrees, joking that while he'd love to have a flying fortress someday, a regular palace will do for now. Along the way, Veldas compliments Lornias on doing a great job hiring so many mercenaries. Lornias responds that it wasn't easy, especially since most of the mercenaries in the region are currently stationed up north. A sudden appearance of barbarians in the northern provinces has led to widespread village raids, prompting the Saint and her army to be dispatched to deal with the threat. Still, the situation there remains grim. One of the mercenaries comments that he's glad they aren't the ones fighting the barbarians. Another mentions that the pay might be worth the risk, though there are unsettling rumors of a witch being seen in the north, something none of them want to face. Veldas brushes off the concern, reminding them that they're heading to the southern cursed lands, not the north, so there's no reason to worry about the witch. The group later arrives at a nearby town to rest for the night. While eating dinner, Lornias brings up the topic again and questions the mercenary Bargo about the witch rumor. Bargo admits it's just gossip. People say a witch is behind the chaos in the north. Lornias finds that hard to believe, arguing that no single person could cause that much destruction, especially with the Saint on the scene. Bargo agrees that it's probably nonsense, but adds that if a witch is real, she would be incredibly dangerous. He also finds it odd that the kingdom sent 2 holy knights on such short notice to investigate lands like these. He asks Veldas for clarification. If this mission is even remotely similar to fighting a witch, Bargo wants no part of it. Veldas admits he wasn't given specific details, but guesses their assignment has something to do with the Dark Elves, who have recently started populating the forest. He believes the kingdom wants to ensure they're not causing trouble. Still, neither Lornias nor Bargo are fully convinced. To most citizens of the kingdom, Dark Elves are feared as assassins and users of dark magic. Lornias expresses concern that if left alone, the Dark Elves might grow strong enough to pose a threat to the kingdom. He even suggests a bit of light genocide, but Veldas firmly shuts him down, reiterating that this is a reconnaissance mission only. If anything gets dangerous, they will retreat. Bargo is relieved to hear that Veldas is so reasonable, as he has no interest in participating in a massacre. Lornias, however, is baffled by Veldas's refusal to wipe out what he considers an evil race. Bargo reminds him, "You've got a wife and kids. Are you really willing to risk your life in a needless bloodbath? Unlike you, the rest of us want to return home to our families." Reluctantly, Lornias agrees to follow orders. Meanwhile, over in Minora, Takuto gathers all his citizens for something he wants them to witness. Everyone is confused at first. He simply stands next to a pile of meat tree fruit. But then Takuto raises his hand and channels mana into the pile. To everyone's amazement, the fruit transforms into a scout bug right before their eyes. The people are astonished. Takuto has essentially created life with a wave of his hand. Atao proudly declares that this is just a glimpse of what Takuto is truly capable of and urges everyone to continue devoting themselves to him. Later, in the throne room, Takuto is relieved that no one questioned him too closely. He and Atao had just followed the procedure from the game, and even Takuto finds it hard to believe that simply infusing mana into fruit can create life. Now that they've confirmed they can safely produce soldiers, Atao says it's time to move on to the next phase, summoning a hero. It will take some time, as Takuto needs to accumulate enough mana to complete the ritual, but once done, they'll be nearly unstoppable. Atao, clearly excited, asks which hero Takuto plans to summon first. He chooses Isla, the queen of all insects, because she offers the best early game advantages. Isla enhances the power of all insect-type soldiers nearby, making scout bugs incredibly effective in battle. She can also produce larva soldiers, useful for both combat and construction, making her perfect for accelerating Minora's development. Atao praises Takuto for his strategic thinking. Aside from Isla's abilities, she's also the only hero without a problematic personality. The other 2 potential heroes are far more volatile, one obsessed with world domination, and the other with total destruction, both far from ideal for a peaceful lifestyle. Still, Takuto knows he'll need to summon them eventually. He just hopes that when he does, they don't cause any trouble. Back with the Holy Knights and mercenaries, the group suddenly encounters an angry hill giant. Lornias orders everyone to prepare for battle, but before the fighting can begin, Veldas steps forward and calmly tells everyone to stand down. He'll handle it alone. Lornias tries to object, but Veldas tells him it will be faster if he handles the situation alone. They don't have time to waste. Veldas approaches the giant and begins chanting a prayer. Lornias explains to the mercenaries that Veldas is using the secret technique of Quolia, which allows one to imbue their attacks with divine power through prayer. The hill giant attempts to strike with its club, but Veldas effortlessly slices it in half. The strength of divine arts varies from knight to knight, but for high-ranking holy knights like Veldas, the power is comparable to that of a lesser dragon. The giant doesn't stand a chance. After Veldas slays the creature, Lornias praises him, saying that with Veldas on their side, they'll be able to handle anything in the dark forest. But Veldas doesn't look pleased. He replies coldly that they can't assume anything just yet. Back in Minora, Takuto is busy munching on a burger. Atao is a bit concerned. He's been eating nothing but junk food since arriving in this world. She doesn't scold him, but does suggest he start eating healthier. Takuto shrugs it off, saying he spent his previous life in a hospital eating nothing but bland nutritional slop. Now, he just wants to enjoy tasty food. Suddenly, he remembers something important. He asks Atao to summon Jia and Moltar for a meeting afterward. She agrees but asks what the meeting is about. Takuto explains that thanks to the additional scout bug, he has a clearer view of the forest and needs advice from Jia and Moltar on how to proceed. Atao guesses he's referring to the nearby village outside the forest, and Takuto confirms. His concern is that the village is close enough to discover Minora's existence soon. Luckily, the village doesn't appear to belong to the Holy Kingdom of Quolia, so they're likely neutral, which means negotiation might be possible. However, if someone from the kingdom were to show up, that would be a different story. Their arrival would almost certainly mean they're on a mission. Takuto reassures Atao that she's worrying too much since there's no evidence anyone knows they exist yet. Atao jokingly warns that saying things like that is usually the death flag for main characters. Takuto laughs, but abruptly stops when he realizes soldiers actually have arrived. And worse, they're armed. These definitely aren't peaceful visitors. Wanting to avoid unnecessary conflict, Takuto tells Atao to deal with them. He asks her to try diplomacy first, but if that fails, she's free to use any level of violence necessary. Meanwhile, outside the forest, the holy expedition prepares to enter. But before they can proceed, Veldas senses something off beyond the tree line and tells everyone to hold back. Moments later, Atao, wearing a cloak, emerges from the forest. Both Veldas and Lornias are surprised to see someone living there. Veldas asks her to identify herself. Atao lies and claims to be a humble dark elf, living peacefully in the woods with her people. Lornias, still obsessed with dark elf extermination, is about to provoke her, but Veldas stops him and changes the topic. He tells Atao that his group is only there to investigate the forest and asks if she would be willing to let them enter. Atao politely declines, saying the dark elves would rather not have their home invaded without cause. Lornias is outraged that a lowly dark elf would deny a request from holy knights. But before he can speak further, Veldas sharply tells him to shut his mouth before he causes real trouble. Though Veldas is already suspicious of Atao, he tries reasoning with her, mentioning a divine revelation from the saint about a great calamity hidden within the forest. Lornias panics. Divine revelations are national secrets, and Veldas just blurted one out to a random woman. He threatens to report Veldas for violating the Holy Order's rules. Unfazed, Veldas tells Lornias to do whatever he wants. Then, turning back to Atao, he again asks if she'll let them through. Atao declines once more, claiming there is nothing evil or dangerous in the forest, though this is a blatant lie. Still, Veldas decides not to argue. He tells the group they're heading back. Veldas isn't naive. He knows Atao is highly suspicious. But he also knows that when a lone cloaked figure confidently confronts an entire expedition, it's best not to pick a fight. This is a tactical retreat. Unfortunately, Lornias doesn't grasp that. Instead, Lornias accuses Veldas of abandoning the mission and declares he's stripping him of command. He orders the mercenaries to follow his lead into the forest. And since Lornias was the one who hired them, they reluctantly comply. Personally, I'd quit on the spot after seeing how shaken Veldas was. But Lornias takes it further and commands the men to seize Atao for defying him. They move in on her, ignoring Veldas's warnings. Despite her efforts to resolve things peacefully, Atao realizes she has no choice left. In the next instant, Lornias wakes up lying in a pool of blood. He's somehow still alive, but the other mercenaries aren't so lucky. Atau has stopped holding back. Veldas shouts for someone to report to the kingdom, but Bargo informs him all the messengers were already taken out by Atau, and the survivors are too slow to escape, especially with her now on the attack. Bargo tells everyone to prepare for battle. They have no other option. The mercenaries launch all their arrows at Atau, but she blocks them effortlessly. She remains completely unharmed. Veldas had hoped to avoid facing someone like her, and Atau is equally frustrated. She tells them plainly that this is all Lornias's fault. She would have let them go if they'd simply left the forest alone. But Lornias had to act righteous, so now she has to kill him. Lornias finally realizes he made a huge mistake. He asks Veldas if he knows what Atau really is. Veldas had suspected from the beginning. He wanted to avoid a confrontation for a reason. Now, seeing her true form, he's certain. Atau is a witch. A witch is a calamity-class monster, officially recognized as a national threat. She's far beyond what mercenaries can handle. Veldas orders everyone to fall back. He and Lornias will deal with her directly. They both charge at Atau and recite their prayers to enhance their attacks. At first, Atau doesn't take them seriously. She effortlessly blocks their strikes and mocks them as weak. However, to her surprise, they manage to cut off 2 of her tentacles. Realizing this won't be as easy as she thought, she deduces that their holy magic grants them bonus damage against her. Veldas believes that if they can sever all her tentacles, she'll be rendered helpless, and Atau definitely doesn't want that to happen. So, Atau takes 2 of the mercenaries hostage, intending to use them as human shields to halt Veldas and Lornias' assault. But Veldas reminds Lornias that if they don't stop Atau here, she might target Quolia next. For the sake of their kingdom, sacrifices must be made. Though reluctant, Lornias agrees. The 2 press forward, slicing through the hostages and Atau's remaining 2 tentacles. Atau is stunned they would kill their comrades so readily, and for a moment it looks like she might actually be in danger. But it was all a ruse. Moments later, several new tentacles erupt from the ground, impaling Veldas multiple times. With his dying breath, he urges Lornias to run. Shortly after, Atau finishes him off with a tentacle strike to the head. Lornias is horrified. He was sure they had destroyed all her tentacles. But while that was true, Atau never said she couldn't grow more. In fact, she could summon as many as she wanted all along. She had simply been toying with them. After witnessing Velda's brutal death, the remaining mercenaries lose all will to fight. Atau clearly isn't planning to spare any of them. Desperate, Lornias orders them to scatter and run, hoping at least one survives to report what happened. The mercenaries drop their weapons and flee. Atau, disinterested in a chase, lets them go, though she sarcastically wishes they had done that from the start to save her the trouble. Lornias stays behind to distract her. He swings his holy sword at her, but is stunned when she blocks it using the very same holy sword technique. How could such an evil being know sacred techniques? Normally, that would be impossible. But when Atau killed Veldas, she absorbed all his experience and sword skills, becoming just as capable as he was. She counters Lornias using Veldas techniques and even praises Veldas as a warrior worthy of elite status. Sadly, he died because Lornias couldn't keep his mouth shut. She taunts Lornias, asking if he ever thought about returning home to his wife and daughter. That catches Lornias off guard. He never mentioned that. That's when it hits him. Atau didn't just take Veldas' skills, she took his memories too. If Atau can absorb memories along with strength, then she will only become more powerful with each kill. She offers to share Veldas' final thoughts before dying. He had been thinking about his men's survival to the very end. A noble man, but she scoffs that Lornias isn't the same. He tries to defend himself by saying the other mercenaries already escaped and would report the incident, so the mission wasn't a total failure. But Atau coldly informs him that all of them are already dead. She may not have chased them herself, but she never said she was alone. She had already ordered the Dark Elves to ensure that no one left alive. The moment the mercenaries fled, they were hunted down and killed. Lornias falls into despair as he realizes he's the last one left. In a final act of desperation, he swings at Atau's head, but she's thoroughly enjoying his despair. She quickly subdues him. Before killing him, she rubs salt in the wound by telling him how things could have gone if he had listened. Everyone would have returned home safely. He would have seen his wife and daughter again. They'd have lived peacefully, never knowing the horrors of the forest. But Lornias chose another path. So now she's going to kill him, then she'll find and kill his family too, using Veldas memories to locate them. Atau smugly says she's petty enough to follow through on her threats. In fact, she might even kill all the villagers Lonius passed through on his way here. As they suffer the most agonizing deaths possible, she plans to make sure they all know it was caused by Paladin Veldis and Lonius. Lonius breaks down and screams, begging Atu not to do it, but she grows bored of tormenting him. Eventually, she ends his life just to shut him up. Once Lonius is dead, Gia approaches Atu to report that he and his men have successfully killed all the fleeing mercenaries. No one will survive to report what happened. Atu thanks him for his good work and asks him to take care of disposing of the bodies as well. Before she leaves, Gia hesitates. There's something he wants to ask. He wants to know if Atu really intends to go through with her plan to slaughter Lonius's family and everyone he ever spoke to. But Atu laughs it off. She says she only said those things to terrify Lonius. She has no intention of committing genocide. That would be far too much work, and she doesn't like to fight unless necessary. That aside, she doesn't have time to chat. She needs to speak to Takuto right away. Before the battle, she overheard Veldis call her a witch, even though she's classified as a hero. He also mentioned something about a witch up north, but Takuto has never heard of a witch class in the game, which makes him suspect that this world differs from the one they know. Takuto already had his suspicions. While most game mechanics remain intact, it's safer to assume that the underlying systems are completely different. Fortunately, not all of the differences are negative. Atu's ability to absorb skills from her victims has improved. Now she can also obtain fragments of their memories. Thanks to this ability, they've learned much about Quolia's current situation from the minds of the investigation squad they wiped out. For now, Quolia seems distracted by the disturbance in the north, so they can't focus fully on Minora. However, the squad's disappearance will surely draw suspicion, and Quolia is bound to take some kind of action. Takuto is aware of that, but reassures Atu that Quolia still doesn't know anything about Minora yet. As long as their leadership isn't completely incompetent, they won't attack right away. Right now, Takuto is far more concerned about the northern disturbance and the witch causing it. Atu tried to extract everything she could from Veldis' memories about witches, but he didn't know much. One thing was clear though, the witch in the north is powerful enough to cause military-scale destruction to the Qualian army by herself. Her name is Arikino. Meanwhile, in the northern territory, Arikino has just destroyed another village. She raises the dead villagers to serve as her undead army and prepares to move on. Takuto knows nothing about Arikino's abilities, but the sheer scale of her destruction, despite being new to the world, leads him to believe she might be an isekai traveler like him and Atu. If that's true, things are about to get even more complicated. Atu asks if they should try to make contact. Given the devastation Arikino has caused, she's probably evil-aligned, so maybe they can get along. But Takuto thinks that's a bad idea. They don't know anything about her personality or motives. Atu is frustrated. Things were finally going well, and now this new threat appears. But Takuto reminds her that Arikino is far to the north and won't be their immediate problem. Still, the presence of a threat like her proves that Minora needs stronger defenses. Takuto plans to create another hero as soon as possible. He had originally intended to choose Aya, but with recent developments, he might need someone more combat-oriented. He also realizes that his strategy of remaining hidden must be reconsidered, especially with unpredictable threats, like this witch emerging. To prepare, he's considering an alliance. Quolia is out of the question after what Atu did to their paladins, but the nation east of the forest is neutral and hasn't interacted with Minora yet. Once the palace is completed, Takuto plans to investigate that nation and assess the possibility of forming diplomatic ties. Meanwhile, in that eastern city, barbarians launch an attack. The city's staff-bearer wipes them out with a bolt of lightning, earning praise from the citizens. But she warns them not to celebrate just yet. They still have a long road ahead. Back in Minora, Atu and Takuto finish their conversation. Before leaving, Atu apologizes. She knows Takuto dislikes unnecessary violence, and she admits she got carried away when dealing with the paladin. But Takuto just stares at her blankly and asks why he would care. Atu is instantly reminded. While Takuto may seem kind, he is, after all, the embodiment of evil. Very little actually disturbs him. Before long, Takuto's palace is finally completed, marking the start of his kingdom's true advancement. He's thrilled. He's always dreamed of having a grand palace. Atu reassures him that one day it will grow so large it could pierce the heavens. However, all this talk about the palace makes Atu realize something important. Despite being king, Takudo still doesn't have a single attendant. It would be strange for a ruler to have no personal servants, so she asks if he has any preferences for one. Takudo, somewhat sheepishly, says he's fine with anyone as long as they're easy to talk to. He admits he's a terrible communicator. In fact, he hasn't had an actual conversation with any of the dark elves since arriving. Atu suspects this is mostly because he appears to them as a mass of negative energy. Regardless, Atu promises she has the perfect plan. Takudo is uneasy about how enthusiastic she is, but decides to see what she comes up with. Without hesitation, Atu summons Gia, Molter, and Emil, ordering them to gather all the young girls in the village because the king desires them. Both Takudo and Gia are stunned by this command. Gia, wanting to give Takudo the benefit of the doubt, asks Atu why she's making such a request. Atu explains, though poorly, that she chose young girls because she thought it would be easier for Takudo to practice speaking with them. But instead of saying it plainly, she boldly declares that Takudo likes young girls, making the situation sound far worse. Alarmed, Takudo quickly stops Atu before she can make things worse, insisting she explain the truth without making him sound like a degenerate. Once Moltar and the others hear the real story, they are relieved to learn that Takudo simply wanted a servant who would be easy to talk to. He suggested children because the kingdom is short on laborers, and he didn't want to take away capable workers from important tasks. Young children who can't contribute much yet seemed like the best option. Impressed by his thoughtfulness, Moltar and the others agree to bring him the children. Takudo looks forward to finally having people to converse with. Unfortunately, there's one major flaw in his plan. He still looks like a walking calamity to normal people. The moment the children see him, they burst into tears. Feeling awful about the whole incident, Atu asks Moltar if there are any children who wouldn't scream at the sight of their king. Sadly, given the circumstances, Moltar can't think of anyone suitable. Gia suddenly speaks up and asks if Takudo has met the twins yet. He admits he hasn't introduced them before because he didn't think they'd be appropriate attendants for a king. To put it bluntly, they have a troubled past, and he worried they might offend Takudo in some way. But given the current lack of options, Takudo tells him to call them in anyway. A few moments later, the twins arrive at the palace, introducing themselves as Kuria and Maria. While Kuria speaks with proper respect, Maria talks to Takudo casually, almost like he's an old friend. Atu can tell at a glance that these two have been through a lot. She asks Kuria about the sores on her body. Kuria explains they were caused by a disease, and Moltar elaborates that she once suffered from a plague. Though cured, the scars remain. Atu then asks what happened to Maria. Kuria hesitates, but finally says her sister went through something very cruel and has never been the same. Before Atu can press further, Maria blurts out, without hesitation, "I ate my mother." This is far worse than Atu imagined. She turns to Moltar for an explanation. He admits it's not something he's proud of, but it was the only way. The Dark Elf tribe will never forget the noble sacrifice their mother made for them. Takudo recalls that when the elves were driven from their home, they had to cross treacherous terrain for a long time. Starvation was inevitable, and sacrifices were made. Being forced to eat her own mother shattered Maria's perception of the world. While the trauma seems to have stripped Maria of fear toward Takudo, Atu isn't sure she'd make a good attendant. But before Atu can voice her doubts, Maria walks right up to Takudo and says he looks white to her, a stark contrast to the embodiment of darkness most people see. Intrigued, Takudo asks if she'd be willing to become his attendant and take care of him. Maria says she'll do her best. Impressed, Takudo appoints her as his servant and even a candidate for leadership in Manara. Atu is astonished. This is the longest conversation Takudo has had with anyone besides her. Still, Kuria remains quiet, so Takudo asks her thoughts. Kuria replies that, as Maria's little sister, it's her duty to always stay by her side. If Maria wants to serve Takudo, then she will too. Pleased, Takudo officially puts them in charge of looking after him. However, Gia and Moltar seem uneasy. After the others leave, Moltar privately tells Takudo that ever since their mother's death, the twins have been completely numb, unable to feel even a shred of emotion. Serving him will come with challenges, but Moltar asks that Takudo treat them with patience until they can heal. Later, Maria and Kuria begin their duties. Problems arise almost immediately. Maria, trying to bring Takudo a glass of water, trips and spills it all over him. Kuria rushes to wipe him down and apologizes, explaining this isn't the first time Maria has done something like this. Takudo reassures them that he isn't upset. A few moments later, Atu enters and is clearly disappointed to see another blunder. She scolds Maria, but Takudo tells her to go easy on the girls. Atu can't stand their constant mistakes, but if Takudo doesn't want to punish them, she has no choice but to let it slide. Atu tells Takudo that he has a meeting to attend, and as his attendants, Maria and Kuria will be required to join him. She warns them to be on their best behavior. The meeting begins shortly after. Emil gives the first report. As head of the construction department, she notes that with the palace completed, they now have many workers available and a surplus of resources in storage. She proposes beginning another project immediately. Takudo and Atu agree and instruct her to start building a clinic as soon as possible. Health and safety, they decide, must be a priority for the people of Manara. Emil accepts the order and promises to begin at once. Since Emil is also responsible for resource collection, she continues with that report. Food and material gathering is going smoothly, and thanks to Takudo's abilities, they have been able to acquire goods the Dark Elves could never produce themselves. However, this process consumes a great deal of his mana. They will eventually need to find other means to obtain these necessities. Relying on emergency production too often isn't sustainable. Takudo tells her it's fine for now, but they must begin prioritizing projects and research that will increase his mana recovery. Atu thanks Emil and calls on Moltar for a magic research update. Moltar proudly announces that he has successfully developed military magic. At present, he is the only one capable of using it, but with training, others could learn as well. There's even a possibility they could harness the ruined mana generated by the palace for powerful spells. Still, since Takudo has no interest in starting wars, such magic may not see much use. For now, Atu orders him to focus on researching the 6 major elements of the magic skill tree, as those will most benefit the nation's growth. Finally, Gia reports on the army status. They currently have 5 scout bugs, which have been mapping uncharted areas of the cursed land. The terrain beyond the forest is mostly open plains, making it risky to explore without being spotted. Given that stealth is one of Manara's top priorities, exploration has been limited. Atu decides that's acceptable, since they already have a complete survey of the forest. She orders Gia to reassign the scouts to routine perimeter patrols. Gia hesitates, concerned about weakening their reconnaissance, but Atu assures him she can handle any threats. Besides, she and Takudo have already decided to create a new hero. Takudo confirms he will be summoning Ella after all and asks if the necessary resources have been gathered. Moltar says the lumber and rations are ready, though the large mana requirement is still an issue. After some debate and compromises, the meeting concludes. Takudo leaves pleased with everyone's dedication. On his way back to the throne room, Maria bumps into him, scattering the meeting documents across the floor. Kuria quickly apologizes on her sister's behalf and kneels to gather the papers, but in the process, they accidentally tear one in half. Expecting him to be angry, they look up nervously, yet Takudo simply tells them not to worry and continues to his throne. Then Maria suddenly asks, "Are you a bad person?" Since his alignment is technically evil, Takudo admits that he is. Maria presses further. If he's a bad person, why hasn't he killed them yet? They've made constant mistakes, errors that, under most rulers, would mean execution, yet he shows them mercy. They simply can't understand why. In response, Takudo asks them what they think the difference is between a good person and a bad person. To Maria, the answer is simple. A good person only does good things, and a bad person only does bad things. However, Takudo tells Maria she's only half right. A good person is indeed someone who must always try to do the right thing. They can't lie, steal, or kill without reason. But a bad person doesn't necessarily have to always do bad things. Bad people are selfish by nature, simply doing whatever they want without regard for others' feelings. In Takudo's case, what he wants is to be kind to them, so there's nothing wrong with being lenient when they make mistakes. Besides, he already knows they've been messing up on purpose in an attempt to make him angry. Maria and Kuria admit that they were hoping he'd eventually lose his temper and kill them because they don't believe they deserve to live after what happened to their mother. Takudo understands why it's hard for them to forgive themselves. though he can't personally relate to their experience. Still, he believes their mother made her sacrifice because she wanted them to survive. He tells them that they are free now, and the best way to honor her memory is to live their lives to the fullest, ensuring her sacrifice wasn't in vain. Moving forward won't be easy, but he promises to stay by their side every step of the way. The two break down in tears at his words and hug him tightly. A few hours later, Atsu walks in and finds them both asleep on Takuto's throne. She feels a twinge of jealousy at how close they've grown to him, but she has more pressing matters to discuss. She informs Takuto that the report on the nearby city is complete. The city is called Dronten, part of the multiracial neutral nation known as Foreign. Because Dronten hosts many different races, Takuto believes negotiations with them should be straightforward. Still, he's concerned by the fact that the city was built in such a remote location. Atsu explains that the reason is a dragon vein mine, an incredibly valuable resource, as dragon veins naturally produce mana. She recommends securing it as soon as possible. The report also notes that Dronten is currently under attack by barbaric forces, including ogres and goblins, and the city's defenses are faltering. Takuto asks whether Dronten has received aid from its homeland. As far as Atsu knows, no reinforcements have been dispatched, so the situation continues to deteriorate. Given the state of the city, Takuto assumes there must already be refugees. Welcoming those refugees into Manara could both boost their population and foster goodwill with Dronten, and in time, they might be able to claim the Dragon Vein Mine for themselves. Takuto orders Ira to prepare an envoy immediately. However, while on their way to the city, Ira's envoy encounters a group of beastkin in the middle of nowhere, and tensions rise quickly. The leader of the beastkin, Tanakapali, is terrified of Ira and her group, as they are shrouded in darkness so dense it can be seen with the naked eye. Despite her fear, Tanakapali tries to keep the situation peaceful, since her subordinates are so frightened that they might lash out, which would surely get them all killed. Because Ira is still under orders to keep the existence of Manara hidden, she prepares to eliminate all witnesses. However, one of the beastkin Pipe is too oblivious to recognize the danger. Instead, he casually asks for Ira's name and begins a conversation, an act so bold and foolish that it catches Ira off guard. Surprised, she decides to delay killing them. Eventually, the two groups come to an understanding, and Ira learns that Tanakapali's party is actually an envoy from Dragon. This stroke of luck saves her the trouble of traveling there herself, so she invites Tanakapali and her men to meet the king of Manara. Tanakapali grows increasingly nervous at the thought of meeting a king powerful enough to command someone like Ira. When she finally meets Takuto, her fears intensify, as all she perceives in him is an endless abyss of darkness. She begins to regret her earlier decision to accept the invitation. Before encountering Ira, Tanakapali's group had been attacked by a giant in the barren lands. Pipe, one of the staff bearers, used grass magic to knock the giant down. Unfortunately, his lack of intelligence kept him from finishing the fight. Instead, he climbed on top of the creature and demanded praise for his magic. Predictably, the giant broke free and hurled him to the ground. Just as the monster was about to crush him, Tanakapali intervened, pinning it to a rock with a combination of grass and earth magic. She then smacked Pipe on the head, scolding him for his reckless behavior. As the only young staff bearer, the lives of many could one day depend on his actions, yet he failed to understand the weight of his responsibility. If Dragon continues to suffer these giant attacks, the nation may face destruction. The only lead they have is a rumor about a calamity appearing in the Cursed Lands. Determined to investigate, Tanakapali had forced Pipe to accompany her, hoping to instill some responsibility in him. Now, however, she regrets bringing him along, as one wrong move could cost them their lives. Suddenly, Pipe blurts out an offer of friendship to Takuto, shocking everyone. Tanakapali panics, fearing such brazen familiarity with the king could warrant execution. She apologizes profusely and tries to excuse his behavior. To her astonishment, Takuto welcomes the gesture warmly, saying he would love to be friends with Pipe. A feast is held to welcome Tanakapali's group. Maria and Karya serve drinks, offering glasses of apple juice. Tanakapali takes a sip and is astonished. It is the most delicious thing she has ever tasted, and even the quality of the glassware surpasses the craftsmanship of the finest artisans on the continent. Pipe, equally impressed, eagerly asks Maria for a refill. Before his drink even arrives, he jumps up and starts complimenting Gia on his impressive muscles. After the feast, Pipe begins showing off his magic to Moltar, and surprisingly, everyone lets him do as he pleases, mostly because Takuto seems to enjoy his company. Takudo is impressed by how sociable Pipe is, regardless of the situation, and he is glad they've become friends. However, since Takudo has never actually had a friend before, he isn't sure what friendship truly entails. While Pipe is busy being scolded by Tanukapali, Tutoria approaches Takudo and asks if he'd like to play a game. The room falls silent at the unexpected request, leaving Takudo feeling awkward. But when Pipe cheerfully agrees, the tension eases and the two sit down to play together. The first game is a simple one invented by Pipe. Each takes a blade of grass, and they pull them against each other to see whose grass breaks first. Tanukapali worries that Takudo might find such a trivial game insulting, but he ends up having a great time. They continue playing for a while, and later Pipe tries out several games designed by Takudo. He thoroughly enjoys them, and even suggests that Takudo could sell these games in Dragon. Before he can say more, Tanukapali cuts him off, reminding him that it isn't his place to make such decisions. Still, Takudo is pleased Pipe mentioned trade, since he already intends to establish relations with Dragon. Yet, he also knows he must set aside his personal friendship with Pipe and act as a ruler during negotiations. Once the meal is finished, Ira, sometimes referred to as Atau, questions Tanukapali about the purpose of her journey. Uneasy, she explains that her country has been under constant attack by barbarians. Ira is surprised, as barbarians usually avoid large cities. Tanukapali clarifies that this unusual aggression is exactly why she came to investigate. Takudo then asks whether this means Dragon lacks the military strength to deal with the threat. The question causes Tanukapali to panic inwardly. If Takudo learns how dire their situation truly is, Manara might attempt conquest instead of alliance. She lies, claiming Dragon still has the strength to repel the barbarians, but the strange nature of their attacks warranted an investigation. Her explanation manages to convince everyone that Dragon can still hold its ground. Unfortunately, Pipe blurts out that earlier, Tanukapali told him their country would be doomed if they couldn't uncover the reason behind the barbarians' assault. This slip embarrasses her, but Takudo and Ira reassure her that Manara has no intention of conquering other nations, as their focus is currently on domestic stability. Still, they cannot ignore the problem. If Dragon falls, Manara would likely be next. Shocked, Tanukapali asks if this means Manara will aid them. She admits that because of their overextension in building a town near the Dragon Vein, Dragon is vulnerable and may not endure much longer. Ira then turns to Takudo, asking his opinion. Takudo answers that since Pipe is his friend, he will offer as much aid as necessary. Overjoyed, Tanukapali asks what Manara wants in return. Ira casually responds that they seek rights to the Dragon Vein, a request that makes Tanukapali uneasy. Still, she has no choice but to accept. Ira assures her that they are content with sharing control of the vein with Dragon, only reserving the exclusive right to determine elemental conversions. This revelation shocks Tanukapali. Manara already possesses technology to convert pure mana into elemental energy, something Dragon would not have developed for another decade. It becomes clear to her that Manara is vastly more advanced, making an alliance even more beneficial. By tradition, however, the decision falls to Pipe as the youngest staff bearer and future leader. Despite his foolishness, he has a natural gift for judging people. When asked, Pipe declares that he wants to be friends with everyone in Manara, sealing the alliance between the two nations. Later, Ira convenes a meeting to discuss the agreement. Manara will provide consumable goods to Dragon, while Dragon will supply metal products and daily necessities. Moltar is pleased with the deal, as until now they had relied solely on Takudo for such resources. But their greatest gain is access to the Dragon Vein, thanks in no small part to Pipe's reckless honesty. Had he not revealed Dragon's desperate state, Tanukapali would have kept her facade of confidence, and meaningful negotiations might never have happened. In that case, Dragon might have been destroyed before Manara could intervene. This leaves Takudo wondering, is Pipe truly an idiot, or was his clumsy behavior secretly calculated to secure the best possible outcome? As the meeting wraps up, the group considers how to manage relations with Dragon moving forward. Maria and Karya admit that, despite the negotiations, none of them know much about Dragon's culture or values, an essential aspect of sustaining an alliance. In the game, Takudo only ever had to click a button to establish friendly relations, so it never occurred to him that he'd have to actively work to maintain an alliance in reality. Since they still know very little about Dragon Ira, Atao suggests that their first step should be to investigate its capital, Crescent Moon. However, because the city is far from Manara, such an investigation would take a long time. Takudo decides to put that aside for now, saying their top priority should be helping Dragon fight off the giants. But Moltar points out that visiting another nation isn't something they can do impulsively, as proper diplomatic protocol must be observed. At that moment, Maria and Karia raise their hands and suggest going under the pretense of simply playing. As childish as it sounds, the idea has merit. If they present the trip as an informal greeting before sending an official delegation, they could depart right away. Moltar volunteers to go, but Takudo declines. To another nation, Moltar would appear as Manara's highest-ranking magical chancellor, making him too important to serve as a casual messenger. The same reasoning applies to Gia and Emil, whose positions are equally critical. What they need is someone Takudo trusts, but who isn't considered too high-ranking. Once again, Maria and Karia volunteer. Takudo immediately refuses, concerned for their safety. Ira, Atao, offers to go instead, but Moltar reminds her that she is Takudo's closest confidant, arguably the most important person besides him, so sending her would also be unwise. At that moment, Maria and Karia approach Takudo directly. They remind him that he once promised to give them the freedom to make their own choices. Right now, they want to support him, even if it means facing danger. Though reluctant, Takudo can't bring himself to say no when faced with their earnest expressions. He finally agrees, while Ira, Atao, grows jealous that Takudo yielded so easily to someone else's charm. Emily voices concerns about the two going alone, but Takudo reassures everyone that he already has reliable bodyguards in mind. Later, he retreats to his throne room, still troubled by Ira's sulking. Unsure of what to do, he consults Maria, who advises him to be honest about his feelings. Taking her advice, Takudo approaches Ira, apologizes for making her uneasy, and reassures her that she doesn't need to worry about being replaced. He expresses his gratitude for everything she does, for always staying by his side, and tells her there's no one he'd rather be with. That's all Ira needed to hear. Instantly, her mood shifts, and she even starts daydreaming about a happily married life with Takudo. Though he has no idea what she's imagining, he's just glad she's no longer upset. Not long after, Takudo brings Maria, Karia, and Ira to the clinic. At first, they're confused. None of them are sick. But Takudo explains that the clinic was cheap to build, so he constructed it on a whim. Since Maria and Karia will soon be departing on a mission, he decided to assign the newly created plague doctors as their personal bodyguards. Takudo introduces the plague doctors to everyone and informs Maria and Karia that these medics are not only capable of treating injuries and diseases, but also of fighting to protect them during their journey. Ira Atao then steps forward and formally assigns the medics to guard Maria and Karia, while also instructing them to observe and learn as much about local culture as possible during their stay in Dragon. The medics are thrilled by the mission, eagerly promising to blend in with the humans and study their ways. Amused by their enthusiasm, Takudo rewards them early by giving them proper names: Ichiro, Jiro, and Saburo. Overjoyed with their new identities, the three thank him excessively, though their boundless excitement makes both Takudo and Ira question whether sending them as guards is truly wise. Karia seems unimpressed by them, but Maria enjoys their antics, finding them entertaining. Meanwhile, in Dragon, the mayor, an elf named Antic, is having a meltdown after being buried under paperwork for an entire week. She had taken this position believing it would free her from the strict traditions of elven society, and perhaps even allow her to find a husband. Instead, she now suffers from back pain, endless desk work, and a growing drinking problem. To make matters worse, she has recently been informed that she must cooperate with the forces of darkness to protect the city, though she has no idea what that even means. Just then, Antic's assistant knocks on her office door, startling her. Irritated, she snaps at the assistant to go away, but quickly realizes she's being too harsh. Correcting her tone, she politely asks what the matter is. Her assistant explains that some visitors have arrived to meet her. Assuming they lack an appointment, Antic orders her assistant to dismiss them. However, upon hearing that the visitors are emissaries from Manora, her attitude changes instantly. She hurries to prepare tea before going to greet them. When Antic enters the meeting room, she introduces herself as the mayor of Dragon and warmly welcomes Maria and Karia. However, she's caught off guard by the three shadowy figures standing behind them. The sight unsettles her, and she wonders what Tanu Kapali was thinking when she agreed to an alliance with people like this. Nevertheless, it is her responsibility to deal with them properly, so she thanks the emissaries for making the long journey. Maria and Karia politely introduce themselves as emissaries of Manora, earning Antic's praise for their courtesy. Internally, however, Antic notes that they are dark elves. Suspicion gnaws at her as she assumes the three figures behind them are assassins, but she hides her concerns and maintains a friendly demeanor. She apologizes for not having prepared a proper welcome ceremony, explaining she didn't know of their arrival. The twins assure her they don't mind. Then, Antic remembers that Tanu Kapali once mentioned twin dark elves who were being trained by the king to become leaders of Manora. Realizing these are the very twins before her, she panics slightly. If she were to offend them, it could jeopardize relations between Dragon and Manora. Nervously, she asks about the purpose of their visit. Since there isn't an official reason, Karia hesitates, unsure what to say. At that moment, Jiro steps forward and explains that they are there in response to Pepe's invitation to come and play. He clarifies that this trip should be regarded as two students visiting to learn about local culture, not an official diplomatic mission. Relieved, Antic realizes this means she won't need to begin formal negotiations about the alliance just yet. If the twins are here only as tourists, her burden is much lighter, though she still knows she must tread carefully to avoid offending them. Smiling, she tells Maria and Karia that they are welcome to stay as long as they like, even offering them a personal tour of the city. Maria and Karia ask if it is truly alright for the mayor to guide them herself, and Antic cheerfully assures them that she knows every corner of the city, making her the perfect guide. In truth, she wants to make a strong impression on the twins to strengthen Dragon's relationship with Manora, and this also provides her with a perfect excuse to escape her dreaded paperwork. There's no way she would pass up such an opportunity. The group spends the day touring the city, with Antic proudly showing Maria and Karia around. The atmosphere is light and enjoyable, and the twins seem to be having fun. Meanwhile, back in Manora, Takudo is buried under a mountain of paperwork of his own, but he makes sure to monitor how things are going with Maria and Karia. He is relieved and glad to see that they are enjoying themselves. That evening, Antic bids farewell to her guests, and once Maria and Karia return to their room, they begin reviewing the day's events. Karia asks her sister what she thinks of the city so far. Maria replies that the townspeople seemed anxious, carrying a sense of unease, complaints of food shortages, rumors of an impending enemy attack, and hope that the gnome would soon arrive to help. The plague doctors are surprised by how much information Maria managed to gather, since they hadn't seen her speaking with anyone directly. But Maria explains that she is simply skilled at reading people's emotions, and her judgments are rarely wrong. The medics are impressed. They hadn't realized she possessed such insight. At that moment, Jiro hands Maria a small bag she had asked for earlier. She pulls out a plant and explains that it is popple grass, a powerful narcotic that is banned in nearly every nation. Jiro sheepishly admits he had purchased it from a shady vendor in a back alley, not realizing what it was at the time. Alarmed, he scolds Maria, warning her that drugs are dangerous and she should dispose of it immediately. What concerns them most, however, is how easily the substance was obtained despite its prohibition. The group quickly concludes that someone within the city must be cultivating and distributing popple grass, which is highly dangerous. Karia is troubled, remarking how terrible it is for people to be doing such things when Antic is working so hard to maintain the city. Saburo adds that with criminal activity present, they will need to be even more vigilant in protecting the twins, as there is no telling what else could happen. The next day, the medics escort Maria and Karia to see the dragon vein, where they marvel at the breathtaking crystals glittering throughout the mine. But then, a man named Vesta approaches them and casually mentions that popple grass grows exceptionally well in this area. Remaining polite but firm, Karia greets Vesta and asks him to get straight to the point. Vesta introduces himself and reveals that he has heard they are emissaries of Manora. He adds that he believes this land will soon be jointly governed by Dragon and Manora, and therefore he wishes to propose a business arrangement. His offer is simple: a partnership with the twins in cultivating popple grass. Intrigued, Karya decides to see how far he will take this. She calmly asks what benefits Manara would receive should they choose to cooperate with him. Vesta explains that popple grass sells for a high price in the market, so naturally Manara would receive a share of the profits. However, he also hints at other offerings he could provide. Karya presses him to specify what kind of offerings he means, but Vesta insists that such matters are too illegal to discuss in public. Instead, he hands Karya a map pointing to a secluded location where they could continue their conversation privately. Though hesitant at first, Karya eventually accepts the map. Vesta grins, saying he always enjoys working with those of evil alignment because they tend to understand him. He complains that the current mayor of the city enforces foolish policies, like banning drug sales or prohibiting human trafficking. But once the King of Manor takes control, he believes leadership will be far more sympathetic to his business practices. A few days later, Maria and Karya meet with Antic again. Since they will be leaving town soon, Antic warmly thanks them for their visit, saying it has been wonderful getting to know the twins. The sisters thank her in return for being such a gracious host and ask if there's anything they can do for her. Antic replies that she would be grateful if they spoke well of her the next time they met with King Takudo, and the twins agree without hesitation. Suddenly, the door bursts open and Vesta barges in with two thugs at his side. Outraged, Antic shouts that he has no right to enter without permission, but Vesta casually reminds her that he never cared about rules to begin with. He announces that he has come to hear the twins' answer to the business proposal, since they never attended the private meeting he had arranged. Maria calmly asks if he is referring to his offer of selling popple grass together. Hearing this, Antic begins to panic. She had no idea Vesta had approached the twins, and fears that if Manor were to ally with him, her city would be destroyed. But Maria, sensing her worry, reassures her. Neither she nor Karya would ever consider working with a scumbag like Vesta. Their refusal to attend his meeting should have been more than enough for him to realize they were not interested. Karya then turns to Antic and respectfully asks if she may handle Vesta herself. Though she would normally avoid interfering in another city's affairs, she fears letting him go unchecked could cause greater harm, and they would hate to spark an international incident by acting without permission. Antic, however, is quick to grant her approval, explaining that Vesta has been a constant nuisance to the people of the city. At Maria and Karya's signal, the plague doctors step forward to confront Vesta. Yet, instead of looking worried, Vesta appears strangely confident. He reveals a small vial in his possession, a concentrated extract of the popple flower. He boasts that a single dose is enough to enslave anyone, reducing them to a mindless addict. Maria and Karya immediately recognize his intent. He plans to use the drug against them. Calmly but firmly, they ask him if he has truly thought this through. Though they may appear to be just two young girls, laying a hand on them would make him the enemy of the entire kingdom of Manara. Surely, King Takudo would not take kindly to such an insult. But in his arrogance, Vesta believes he can blackmail the king by enslaving the twins as his personal property. What he fails to consider, however, is the presence of the three loyal guardians standing directly in front of him. Vesta hands the vial of siren extract to his goons and orders them to seize the twins. But before they can even take a step forward, a sword suddenly goes flying across the room and lodges itself into the wall just inches from Vesta's head. He turns horrified, only to witness the gruesome fate his men have suffered. Meanwhile, back in Manara, Takudo enjoys a quiet cup of tea with Ao, feeling quite pleased with himself. He reflects on how wise it was to create those medics, as they have proven invaluable in protecting the twins. Curious, Emil asks why Takudo chose to send medics instead of simply dispatching a squad of trained warriors with Maria and Karya. Ao explains that the three plague doctors have an unusual fascination with humans and demi-humans. They love studying human biology, and while their knowledge makes them excellent healers, their obsession has a much darker side, because sometimes they also eat brains. That duality makes them absolutely terrifying when they decide to unleash their true nature. Back in Dragon, the medics have just finished dismembering Vesta's goons with surgical precision. Now, in an almost childlike display of glee, they dance around the office holding up the flayed skins, delighted to add them to their growing collection. The sight causes Antic to collapse to her knees in sheer horror. But before she can fully break down, Maria approaches and gently comforts her, offering a calm presence amidst the nightmare. As for Vesta, his end is far from comforting. Trembling, he falls to the floor and begs for mercy. But Karya steps forward coldly, her voice steady with righteous fury. She tells him he has already gone too far. She had been willing to overlook his drug trafficking since it wasn't her concern. But by daring to threaten her and her sister, and worse, by insulting her glorious king, Takudo, he sealed his fate. With a commanding tone, Kariya orders the medics to kill him. They obey without hesitation. Minutes later, the three plague doctors are parading around the office, proudly cosplaying Vesta's skin as though it were just another trophy. Antic is left speechless, her mind struggling to process the surreal horror she has just witnessed. Kariya turns to her politely and apologizes for making such a mess in her office. She even asks if she should cover the cleaning bill. Shaking nervously, Antic insists it's not necessary. When Kariya smiles warmly in gratitude, Antic realizes that expression is somehow even more terrifying than the sight of the medics wearing their grisly new suits. In that moment, she can't help but regret ever becoming the mayor of this city. But whether she likes it or not, this is her life now, and she'll just have to get used to it. Antic's frightened expression quickly fades as she actually finds the situation somewhat funny. A few days later, the twins return from their journey. Upon their arrival, Atao is seen scolding Takudo for giving them too much freedom during the mission. She is furious that Takudo abandoned his pile of work just to monitor the twins through the eyes of the medics. Takudo defends himself, saying he only did it because he didn't want to be too strict and make the twins hate him. That excuse only fuels Atao's anger. She reminds him that it is not his place to pamper the girls to that extent, since he is their king, not their father. Atao then turns her anger toward the twins, demanding to know why they conspired with King Takudo behind her back. After that, she directs her scolding at the medics, calling them out for skinning a human alive right in front of the mayor. The medics, however, show no remorse, claiming that such actions bring them one step closer to becoming human themselves. Hearing that, Atao explodes and screams at them to shut up. Following this, everyone, including King Takudo, kneels before her as she orders them to reflect on the poor decisions they made. Takudo admits that the medics may have been a bad influence on Maria and Kariya, since they were the ones who gave the order to kill in front of the mayor. Atao continues her lecture, saying this is exactly what happens when they are sent on missions without proper supervision. She then declares that none of them are to move until they finish writing statements acknowledging they understand the consequences of their actions. Hearing this, everyone just sighs in defeat. A few hours later, they gather for a meeting to discuss what should be done about Dragon. However, Takudo interrupts by handing candy to Maria and Kariya, which causes Atao to snap again, shouting that they must not feel any regret at all. But Gia and the other dark elves redirect her focus, saying they understand her anger but believe the meeting should take priority. Realizing the sense in their words, Atao calms down and tells them to continue. Moltar then speaks up, asking the twins if their investigation in Dragon went exactly as written in the report. Kariya confirms, adding that King Takudo himself reviewed it, so she is certain it's accurate. Moltar looks it over and concludes that the city seems very unstable. Emily joins in, saying Dragon lacks the resources to maintain proper order, which is why crime has been on the rise. From her perspective, it's only a matter of time before the city suffers a major disruption. Atao reviews the report as well and notes that, on top of everything, Dragon is also facing outside attacks from barbarians. According to the report, the city is dealing with monsters such as goblins, orcs, and hill giants. Gia says the goblins and orcs aren't much of a problem, but the real issue lies with the hill giants. They've started appearing in groups near the city, and worse, their numbers seem to be steadily increasing every day. Atao asks what they mean by suddenly appear, but Moltar explains that the monsters don't literally materialize out of nowhere. It only seems that way to Dragon's people because of their weak detection abilities. Beastmen are known for their sharp senses when it comes to detecting approaching enemies, but Moltar guesses the ones in Dragon aren't putting their abilities to use, likely because they're exhausted. Gia concludes that no matter how you look at it, Dragon is on the verge of collapse. Because of this, he suggests dispatching a large force as quickly as possible to support the city. Emily agrees with Gia's suggestion, but points out that splitting their forces would leave them short on manpower for important tasks like construction and farming. In response, Gia suggests sending most of their warriors instead, but before Emily can share her thoughts, Atao interrupts, declaring that no matter who they choose to dispatch, she herself will also be going. Moltar hears this and assumes it's because of her ability to steal skills. Atao confirms, saying that if she goes to the battlefield, she should be able to acquire some very useful abilities. King Takudo agrees, adding that it would also be a good chance for Atao to grow stronger, which is why he had already planned to send her with the troops. Moltar responds by saying that if that's the case, he should be entrusted with providing the retinue. Atao agrees, confident she can trust Moltar with the negotiations and coordination. Still, she stresses the need for more men on the ground. Hearing that, Moltar suggests bringing some of his apprentices along, since they're skilled enough to handle routine attacks. Atao is pleased with the idea. However, Emily remains concerned, noting that until now their national defense has depended heavily on Atao's presence. Hearing this, Jia clenches his teeth and admits he can't deny it. Takudo then speaks up, saying he's aware of the issue, which is why they'll be creating a new hero, Isla, the new cornerstone of their defense. Everyone is shocked at the announcement. Moltar rises to commend King Takudo, calling it another brilliant decision. Emily agrees, saying Takudo must truly be wise to have anticipated the situation back when he first began production. Takudo admits that while the timing worked out perfectly, it wasn't the result of some master plan, it just happened by chance. The elves bow in respect at his honesty, but in that moment, Takudo realizes that as a king, sometimes pretending to be almighty is still necessary. Even so, he knows he made the right choice in allowing the Dark Elves to participate in these meetings. His current life is nothing like his past, when he had to carry the weight of every decision alone. Atao asks if he has anything more to add, and Takudo stands to declare that everything is perfect, just as they decided. The Dark Elves feel honored to receive praise from their king, and promise they will not let him down. A few hours later, everyone gathers outside, and Atao is especially excited. They're finally about to create the new hero. Takudo shares her excitement, admitting that although they had to ration heavily to secure the resources, it was completely worth it. Karia asks Takudo what kind of person the summoned hero will be. Takudo admits he has no idea, saying it will be a surprise he's looking forward to. After that, Takudo and Atao begin speaking telepathically. Takudo asks her what will happen with Isla. Atao replies that since Isla will be the very first hero they've summoned since arriving in this world, there's no way to predict her nature. She adds that if Isla rebels and tries to attack, she will protect Takudo with her life. As Takudo begins the summoning process, he continues telepathically, telling Atao not to risk her life. If Takudo were to lose her, he wouldn't be able to resummon her. A purple cloud forms and condenses into a cocoon, out of which Isla emerges. Atao isn't sure how Isla will react, though she believes the chances of hostility are slim. Isla appears in the form of a giant mantis, and the moment she rises, she unleashes a deafening roar, forcing Takudo and the others to keep their guard up. But then, Isla walks straight to Takudo and acknowledges him as her king. Thanking him for summoning her, she says she's overjoyed to serve Takudo once again. Excited, Takudo asks if she actually remembers him. Isla confirms, even calling him by name to prove it. Atao steps forward, demanding Isla vow to serve Takudo without rebellion. Isla simply pats Atao's head in a playful manner, saying she doesn't need to be so serious. Of course, she vows to serve King Takudo. She adds that the time she spent with him before arriving in this world has been etched into her very being. Hearing this is proof enough that Isla remembers him from before. She explains there's no way she could ever forget him, since he was the only one capable of drawing out her full power. After that, she asks Takudo to explain the current situation. Takudo takes her into the palace and gives her a full breakdown of everything that's happened. He admits there's still much she doesn't understand, but thanks to Atao, he's managed to get by. Atao blushes, saying she's only here because of him anyway. With that, Isla says she understands her role is to protect their nation. Takudo confirms, telling her she's their defense hero, while the attack hero will be the one to destroy the barbarians and dragon. Atao knows going on the mission is the best call, but she can't help feeling sad about leaving him. Takudo admits he'll miss her too, but reminds her she's the best one for the job. Realizing this will be their first time apart since arriving in this world, they hug tightly, confessing how much they'll miss each other. Meanwhile, Isla simply watches them and remarks that she should probably give them some privacy. The next day, Atao waves goodbye to Takudo and the others as she heads off to Dragon with the warriors. After she leaves, Isla finally speaks up, saying it's about time she got to work. She bows respectfully and tells Takudo to leave everything to her. A few hours later, Isla notices Takudo isn't as sharp sharp as usual without Atao around. Earlier, she even caught him sleeping, so she asks what has him so tired. The twins chime in, explaining that Takuto always sleeps in until noon, even when he hasn't done anything tiring the day before. Ayla sighs and teases him, saying he's acting like a baby standing in front of her. She reminds him he's the leader of a great nation. If his people ever found out he slept until noon and had to be woken up, what would they think? She tells him to start waking up early from now on. Takuto just nods and says he'll try his best. Karia comments that Ayla is really different from Atao, since Atao always let Takuto do whatever he wanted. Ayla ignores the remark and instead asks to borrow the twins for a while. She wants them to show her around since she's still unfamiliar with Minoru's main facilities. Takuto assumes Ayla wants to see things firsthand instead of just reading a map, so she can form a clearer picture of the nation. With that in mind, he agrees, and the twins eagerly scurry off with Ayla to give her the tour. Just then, Emily walks over to Takuto with a revised report, asking for his approval. As Takuto accepts it, he realizes this might actually be the first time he's spoken to someone alone without Atao. After looking it over, he tells her the report is solid, but he wants some changes. Starting next week, he wants her to reduce the manpower in gathering and redirect it elsewhere. Emily bows and says she'll follow his orders immediately. Gia then walks in, asking for his approval on their report. Takuto just rolls his eyes, realizing it's going to be a very long day. Meanwhile, as the twins guide Ayla through the facilities, she asks them to explain everything they know about the place. Just as they begin, they bump into Emily, who's clearly upset. She complains that Gia has broken their training equipment again. It's been frustrating having to scrape together the budget to replace things each time. Ayla just pats Emily's head and promises to scold Gia later. Judging by Emily's expression, she's definitely enjoying the head pats. At the training ground, Gia is once again showing off his strength, breaking everyone's weapons in a single slash. He turns on his team, scolding them for their sloppy form, saying they'll never be able to protect Minoru at this rate. That's when Ayla suddenly appears behind him. She tells him to think twice before destroying the equipment. Gia apologizes and tries to explain himself, but Ayla simply pats his head and says that forgetting himself so quickly just proves he's still a child. Embarrassed, Gia politely asks her to stop patting him, since it makes him look less intimidating in front of his soldiers. Suddenly, a loud banging sound echoes nearby. Ayla stays alert and asks what it is, but the twins quickly run over to tell her it's just the signal for dinner. They all head to the dining area, where the dark elves are already gathered and eating. Some of them bring out a table and fine dishware for Ayla to use since she outranks them, but she refuses. Instead, she sits on the floor and says she'll use the same dishware as everyone else. As a defense hero, she believes she can only do her job properly if she shares the same perspective as the people. Maria and Karia are moved by this. They run off for a bit and return with a special wooden plate they made themselves, offering it as a gift. Ayla finds the gesture adorable, so she hugs them both and gives them head pats. The girls admit they were starting to feel jealous seeing everyone else get pats while they didn't. Later that night, Ayla is on patrol when she hears someone crying. She goes to the door and finds Karia crying, with Maria trying to comfort her. Maria explains that Karia woke up from a bad dream. Ayla praises Maria for being such a good big sister, then asks for details. The twins confess they often dream of their mother. Karia knows there's nothing she can do about what happened, but sometimes she can't help reliving those painful memories. Still, they reassure Ayla not to worry, saying those dreams happen much less often now. Tonight was the first time in a long while. Ayla gently comes up with an idea. From now on, she'll sleep beside them. That way, when they wake up, she'll be right there, and they won't have to be scared. She embraces them warmly, promising that she'll always be there for them. The next day, Ayla reports to Takuto. After discussing with Emily, she recommends building a learning institute as their next project. Takuto agrees, adding that after that, they'll construct the living reeds. Ayla notes that the forest terrain already gives the dark elves an advantage, and the cursed land strengthens all evil beings. Takuto agrees, saying that since they're not at war, there's no need to rush strengthening their defenses. Finally, Ayla asks how things are going with Atao. Takuto smirks, saying she seems to be in a rather amusing situation. Using telepathy, he peers through Atao's eyes and sees she's just about to slaughter the barbarians. Dozens of giants charge straight at Atu, For anyone else, this would be terrifying, but for her, it's nothing more than a nuisance. With a casual wave of her tentacles, every giant is instantly torn apart into chunks of meat. Antic is both amazed and horrified by the display. It's even more terrifying than the medic incident, and she can barely hold herself together. Sensing this, Atu tells her she can take a break if she wants. The front lines are already under control. Antic gratefully accepts. Afterwards, Atu sits down with Molter, and the citizens of Dragon treat her warmly. One even brings her a drink so she can relax. Molter admits he thought the townsfolk would be too afraid to approach her after seeing her true form. But surprisingly, they've adjusted well. The main reason? When Atu first revealed herself, Pippa compared her to an octopus, so now everyone just thinks of her as an octopus demi-human. Atu finds it a little insulting, but at this point, correcting them isn't worth the effort. Changing the subject, Molter asks how her plan to harvest abilities from the giants is going. Atu replies it's been a great success. Their skills are far better than she expected. Still, she can't figure out how the giants gained such powers in the first place. Just then, Atu senses something in the distance. A giant is approaching the city. This is one of the mysteries about the giants. No matter how hard they monitor, no one, not even Atu or Molter, can detect them until they're already too close. Moments later, Antic rushes in with news of the giant, but Atu calmly says there's no need to worry, she'll handle it herself. She dashes toward the battlefield before Antic can protest. Antic fears Atu is being reckless, but Molter reassures her. Something as weak as a hill giant could never defeat Atu. He suggests waiting, though he admits it'd be boring to just sit back. Molter joins in, pulling out his staff. Using his newly learned magic, he casts Land of Ruin, summoning a dark mist that buffs allies and weakens enemies. Atu appreciates the support and takes full advantage of it. She draws her sword, channels the stolen holy sword arts, and cleaves the giant clean in two. It's a routine victory until something strange happens. The giant's body vanishes, leaving behind a pile of gold coins. Shocked, Atu reports this to Takuto, who has no idea why such a thing would happen. This was never a mechanic in his Monera playthroughs. Molter is equally baffled. Not only has he never seen this phenomenon, but no one even recognizes the symbols stamped on the coins. Takuto then has an idea. He asks Atu to share her vision with him so he can examine the coins personally. After studying them closely, a memory clicks. These coins are identical to the currency from an RPG he once played, Brave Quest. Meanwhile, in the far north, the Saint and her knights march through a city recently destroyed by Ireno. As the knights investigate the ruins, their inspection is cut short. Every one of them suddenly has their brains blown out. The one responsible is Ireno herself, but this marks the 17th time the Saint has faced her, and she still can't understand why the woman just won't stay dead. Ireno corrects her with a twisted smile. She has been dying, in fact. The Saint has already killed her 17 times. But that doesn't make it any less unfair in her eyes. The Saint's strength is overwhelming, while Ireno's own power, though formidable, never comes close. Each death is excruciating, and she resents it deeply. The Saint cuts her off, saying she knows Ireno is just stalling for time. Realizing she's been caught, Ireno acts. She seizes control of every corpse in the ruined city, including the knights who were just slain, and orders them to attack. The Saint is disgusted by such grotesque sorcery, but it changes nothing. Raising her staff, she summons a massive storm of flames, reducing the undead army to ash in an instant. Without hesitation, she charges forward and drives her weapon straight through Ireno's chest. This makes it the 18th time the Saint has killed her. And though she knows Ireno will inevitably return, at least this victory buys her enough time to devise a permanent solution. Meanwhile, back in Dragon, panic spreads through the guards. A massive army of giants has appeared near the city, far more than anyone has ever seen gathered in one place. By now, Takuto has pieced things together. The attackers must have come from the world of Brave Quest. In that game, encounters are randomly generated, which explains why there were never any warning signs before the giants appeared. Ayla had considered the possibility of encountering enemies brought into this world the same way they were, but she never imagined they'd come from a completely different genre of game. The system of Eternal Nations is very different from Brave Quest, but Takuto has experience with both, giving him a decisive advantage. Up on a nearby cliff, the masterminds behind the attack Flamin and Ice Rock watched the chaos unfold. They were granted complete freedom to do whatever it takes to conquer this land in the name of their demon lord. Their arrival in this world was fortunate. All the goblins and giants immediately flocked to their banner, swelling their demon army with overwhelming numbers. But Ice Rock hesitates. They had devoted their entire lives to conquering Brave Quest. Should they really abandon that mission to start over in this new world? Flamin, however, isn't one for deep thoughts. He dismisses the concern, saying the only thing that matters is carrying out the Demon Lord's will. With that, the two prepare to unleash their forces on Dragon, intent on drowning the land in despair. All the monsters charge at Ice Rock's command, and he asks Flamin if he'll be joining the battle as well. But Flamin says he'd rather sit this one out so that Ice Rock can have the honor of leading. Ice Rock thanks him, then leaps onto the battlefield. While he's gone, Flamin begins working on his secondary goal for the mission. On the battlefield, Ice Rock orders his troops to lay waste to the city. But suddenly, a thick black smoke covers the area, causing every monster to choke violently. Shocked, Ice Rock and his mage assistant Oslo realize they've never seen a spell like this before. Judging by the effect, Oslo deduces that it must be a spell meant to empower evil line fighters, since the neutral monsters are suffering while the demons like himself and Ice Rock are actually getting stronger. A moment later, Oslo is stabbed through the abdomen by one of Atu's tentacles. With him taken care of, she turns her full attention toward Ice Rock. Takuto has already mentioned something about a warrior of ice, so Atu assumes Ice Rock must be one of the Demon Lord's 4 generals. Ice Rock demands to know how she figured out his identity so quickly. Atu explains calmly that she is a hero from the game Eternal Nations, serving under her glorious king Takuto. There's no point in dragging it out because she intends to kill everyone here soon. Back at the city walls, Antic gathers the soldiers and orders them to fire their arrows at the advancing army. But their barrage looks utterly pathetic, so she changes tactics and commands them to evacuate the citizens. They'll have to abandon the city. Just then, Moltar arrives. Amused, he remarks that Antic is already thinking of fleeing, but she insists it's their only option. Moltar's spell may have slowed the enemy, but it won't hold forever. Once the monsters reach the walls, there's no way they can hold them off. Moltar understands her fear, but he assures her there's no need to panic. Atu is already on the battlefield, and as long as she's there, defeat is impossible. Soon, she'll claim the enemy general's head. Without a commander, the monster army will collapse into chaos, and Dragon's forces will finish them off with ease. Antic is astonished by Moltar's calm confidence, but when she looks out at the battlefield, she sees Atu tearing through the enemy forces with ease. Suddenly, everything he said makes sense, and she starts to realize just how powerful Minora truly is. Meanwhile, Atu is absolutely humiliating Ice Rock. She evades every one of his attacks while slaughtering monsters left and right. Ice Rock can't comprehend how she's able to overwhelm him so completely without him landing a single blow. But she's simply following the plan Takuto devised. Brave Quest was designed as an RPG with small-scale combat mechanics, while Eternal Nations is a civilization simulator, giving its heroes far greater range and power than anyone from Brave Quest could ever match. Frustrated, Ice Rock yells at Atu, demanding to know why she's even interfering. Since she's clearly evil-aligned, shouldn't she also wish to serve the Demon Lord and conquer the world? To be honest, there was a time when both Atu and Takuto considered world conquest, but they quickly abandoned the idea because it would be far too much work. She was already constantly buried in paperwork as it was, so why on earth would she want to manage the entire world? Honestly, Ira almost lost it at the word paperwork, because she didn't even know that was a thing. She asked Ice Rock how they expected to run the world once it was conquered. Then she joked that Ice Rock must have been one of those RPG characters. No one bothered giving a proper backstory. Ice Rock had no idea what she meant by RPG. So Ira tried jogging his memory, reminding him of all the countless times he must have died at the hands of the game's hero. After all, he was nothing more than a mid-level boss. She mocked him, saying it must suck to exist solely to be defeated. And while she'd love to say she understood how he felt, she couldn't relate to a loser like him. All the while, she was effortlessly parrying Ice Rock's attacks. Enraged, he declared that he would crush all who opposed his mighty demon king. But Ira laughed and told him the only true ruler here was Takuto, the king of Minora. She saw him charging up an attack and thought he was foolish for believing he could hit her with such a telegraphed move. However, when she tried to move away, she realized her feet had been frozen in place by Ice Rock's frost. She hadn't prepared for that at all, leaving her vulnerable as his axe came down. The strike did heavy damage, and Ice Rock felt proud of himself. But only a moment later, Aira got back up and killed him instantly. She felt ashamed that a weakling like him had managed to injure her, though her wounds healed almost instantly, so it wasn't a big deal. Still, she complained about how unfair Ice Rock's attack had been. How was she supposed to dodge a strike that froze her in place beforehand? After stealing his skill, she realized it was literally a guaranteed hit, meaning there was nothing she could have done. Anyway, it was time for her to give her report to Takudo. But when she tried contacting him, to her horror she realized something was terribly wrong. Enemies had gathered around Minora. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the continent, the Demon Lord from Brave Quest is constructing his new castle, already making plans to conquer this new world. Back in Minora, one of the Dark Elf guards rushes into Takudo's office to report that enemy forces are approaching. However, Takudo already knew about it and doesn't seem the least bit worried. Aira explains to the guard that one of Takudo's abilities allows him to know everything happening within his kingdom. As soon as the army entered the forest, Takudo had already ordered Jia to confront them with Minora's main forces. Maria and Karia grow concerned about the situation and ask Takudo if Minora is in danger. He calmly reassures them that there's nothing to worry about. He already has a plan. Ayla then voices her concern that the Demon Lord leading the army might be another player like Takudo, but he couldn't care less. Normally, he would attempt a peaceful resolution, but since Atao already killed one of the Demon King's 4 generals and the enemy chose to attack his kingdom directly, he isn't going to show any mercy this time. With Ayla, Jia, the Dark Elf warriors, healers, and the larvae created by Ayla for construction, Takudo is confident they can hold their ground against the invading forces. Moments later, Takudo receives a message from Emily, who informs him that she has evacuated all non-combatant citizens. He's pleased with this, knowing it reduces the risk of civilian casualties. Soon after, Jia calls him from the front lines to give an estimate of enemy numbers. He reports about 1,000 troops, mostly orcs, goblins, and several strange creatures he has never encountered before. Takudo thanks him for the information and tells him to focus on defending the capital. Although 1,000 enemies are more than expected, Takudo suspects that one of the 4 generals must be among them. Still, he believes they can handle it. After all, if he could defeat Lost Lace and Silkong, then he can manage this too. Fortunately, Minora has a decent stockpile of resources. Since Takudo knows the mechanics of Brave Quest, they already hold an advantage. Ayla asks if he plans to use the resources to create new troops, but to her surprise, Takudo explains that he's investing all of them into her instead. He instructs her to level up as much as possible to acquire the predation and parasitic egg skills. With those, she should be able to devastate the enemy army. Based on what he observed during Atao's battle with the Ice General, Takudo has a rough idea of the general's strength. In her current state, Ayla should be able to win, even if one of them appears. Honored by his trust, Ayla vows to meet his expectations and prepares to fly into battle. Before she leaves, Takudo warns her to remain cautious, since the Brave Quest system contains unfair skills that could prove fatal if she is caught off guard. Aira recalls hearing about something similar happening to Atao, so Ayla promises to stay extra careful. With nothing more to say, Takudo bids farewell as Ayla departs after saying goodbye to the twins and the civilians. Meanwhile, deep in a forest, a group of fire demon soldiers marches toward Minora. One of the Night's Wonders, allowed Y Flamin, ordered them to split from Ice Rock's group, just to invade such a creepy place. The mage explains that he suspects Flamin may have ordered this operation without the Demon Lord's permission, and there's a good chance he intends to betray him in the near future. The knight is shocked and asks why Flamin would do such a thing. The mage replies that while the rest of them simply appeared in this new world, things were different for Flamin and the Demon Lord. He is about to explain further when suddenly they hear something approaching. They see what appears to be one of the orc scouts sent to investigate the forest. But something is clearly wrong. Covered from head to toe in pulsating bumps, the orc begs for help, saying he doesn't understand what's happening. Before they can react, hundreds of Ayla's larvae burst out from the orc skin and swarm toward the fire soldiers. In a panic, the soldiers attempt to fight back, but the overwhelming number of larvae leaves them helpless. The mage quickly orders a retreat so they can regroup outside the forest. Before they can escape, however, a voice calls out from the tree line, mocking them for retreating so soon. Terrified, the soldiers demand the attacker reveal themselves, only to be shocked by the sight of a 10-foot-tall mantis. Ira emerges from the forest and chastises them, saying that if they truly call themselves creatures of darkness, they should fight with more ruthlessness, just like she is about to demonstrate. Needless to say, the soldiers don't stand a chance, and within minutes, they are all slaughtered. Afterward, Ira debates whether their corpses are even worth eating, since they don't look very nutritious. Suddenly, she senses a strong presence approaching. When she turns, she finds Flamen, who seems unconcerned about the soldiers she just killed. He introduces himself as one of the Demon Lord's 4 generals. Ira is pleased. His arrival saves her the trouble of seeking him out. Flamen is surprised she anticipated his presence, but she explains that it was only natural. A large army like this must have a powerful commander, and without him, their morale would collapse, just as it did when Ice Rock was defeated at Dragton. Flamen shows little surprise at Ice Rock's death, calling him an idiot who was bound to die eventually. Isla interrupts, criticizing him for speaking ill of an ally, but Flamen admits he never liked Ice Rock anyway, declaring that he was the weakest of the generals. In contrast, Flamen claims he is far stronger and warns Ira not to assume she can win. Ira laughs at his arrogance, but Flamen doubles down, boasting that after killing her, he will drag Takudo from his throne and kill him too. Until now, Ira had been casual, but the moment Flamen disrespects Takudo's name, her mood changes completely. She is furious. Flamen notices but remains confident, powering up before leaping into the air to clash with her. Meanwhile, back in the city, the twins stand guard outside Takudo's office while he uses his powers to monitor the situation. He senses that Isla has begun her battle with Flamen, but he isn't worried. They've already confirmed that the attacks of Minera's heroes are far superior compared to the RP combat system, so he believes it's only a matter of time before Isla wins, just as Atau did. Elsewhere, to the south, Gia and the Dark Elf warriors hold a defensive formation around the capital, preventing Flamen soldiers from advancing, while Imel manages the evacuation of civilians. On the surface, everything seems under control, but for some reason, Takudo can't shake the feeling that something is about to go terribly wrong. The twins notice that Takudo looks troubled, so they ask him what's wrong. However, he honestly can't figure out why he feels so uneasy. He asks if they can think of any variables he might have missed, but they have no idea what he's referring to. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, Flamen and Isla have been fighting for several minutes now. Flamen is impressed, admitting he didn't expect the freaks in this world to be so strong. But hearing this bald, Voldemort-looking man call her a freak enrages Isla, so she unleashes a swarm of larvae that cling to his body. Normally, this would finish an enemy off, but Flamen burns them to ash with his fire magic and frees himself. He then jokes that it's unfair for Isla to be the only one who can summon minions. Moments later, a group of orcs and goblins materialize around him. Isla is shocked, realizing that Flamen can summon minions without consuming any resources, meaning he can do it indefinitely. Curious, she calls for a timeout to ask him a question, but Flamen ignores her and launches more fireballs, forcing Isla to block with her larvae. He then orders his minions to attack, but she quickly infects them with her parasites, turning them against him and forcing him to retreat temporarily. With some breathing room, she asks why he chose to attack Manara, since splitting forces instead of focusing on Dragon was unwise. Flamen cryptically replies that if her master hasn't told her already, maybe she should reconsider who she serves. Isla, however, remains steadfast, declaring her unwavering loyalty to Takudo. Hearing this irritates Flamen, and he presses her about what she thinks her role is. She proudly declares herself a hero of Manara and a loyal servant to King Takudo. This enrages Flamen further. He cannot understand how Isla can serve with such pride and conviction. Then it dawns on him. She serves out of her own free will, which is why she enjoys it. He, on the other hand, is bound by the coding of his game to serve the Demon Lord, regardless of his own will, and he despises it. Still, he believes that once he fulfills his mission to destroy this world, he will finally be freed from his forced servitude. Unleashing his full power, Flamen chases Isla through the skies with a torrent of fire, eventually landing a direct hit. Thinking he has won, he approaches, only to realize she protected herself with a cocoon. She mocks him, saying he'll have to try much harder if he hopes to defeat her. In desperation, Flamen unleashes rapid-fire attacks, but Isla easily dodges until he exhausts his mana and becomes defenseless. Seizing the opportunity, she slashes him across the chest. Realizing this is the end, Flamen recalls the strange being who spoke to him, and the demon lord before they were summoned here, promising him freedom if he destroyed this world. Now he understands that a puppet like him could never accomplish such a feat. Still, he refuses to give up. Moments later, Isla slashes him in half, defeating him once and for all. She immediately calls out to Takuto to report her victory, but suddenly loses contact. At that moment, Maria and Karia appear before her. Confused, Isla orders her larvae to protect the twins. But then, to her horror, Flamen's corpse begins to move again.
Takuto is completely stunned. The twins have vanished onto the battlefield, a feat that should be impossible. He quickly attempts to use his shared perception to contact them, but it doesn't work. Before he can even process what is happening, a system message suddenly pops up: chat function disabled. The realization sends a shiver down his spine. Meanwhile, Isla reacts swiftly. She orders her larvae to protect Maria and Karia. At first, the larvae swarm around the girls like a protective wall. But then, without warning, they scatter in panic, sensing an overwhelming presence. Isla tries to reach out to the brain eaters next, but they do not respond. She attempts to contact Takuto, yet even he fails to answer. Maria and Karia ask Isla what is happening. Instead of answering directly, she pulls them into a protective hug, reassuring them softly. She promises that they will escape without wasting another second. Carrying them into the air, she flies off. However, after some time and finally stopping to catch their breath, the sight that greets them sends chills down their spines. Flamen's body lies right in front of them. Somehow, they have been flying in circles this entire time. Suddenly, Flamen bursts out laughing. He sneers at Isla, mocking her. He taunts that it must feel terrible to be her right now, as she can no longer kill him. Isla refuses to believe it. Determined, she raises her mantis-like claw and slashes at him, aiming to end the fight. But before her strike can land, a barrier instantly forms, blocking her attack. Flamen laughs even louder, declaring that there is no point in trying anymore. She simply cannot kill him since he is, after all, already dead. At that very moment, Takuto receives another system message: auto-defend activated. Seeing this, he begins piecing things together, recalling everything Flamen had orchestrated during his time in Brave Quest. Back on the battlefield, Flamen mocks Isla again, calling her arrogant for thinking she could win so easily. Maria and Karia, visibly terrified, cling to each other. But Isla reassures them firmly that she will not let Flamen lay a single finger on them. Fueled by rage, Isla launches a furious storm of attacks. Her claws strike again and again, yet every blow bounces harmlessly off the barrier. Flamen simply laughs, savoring every second of her desperation. Suddenly, a strange red aura envelopes Isla and the twins. Before they can react, Maria and Karia begin walking toward Flamen. Their eyes show fear, but their bodies are no longer under their control. They are compelled by the aura. Isla desperately tries to pull them back, but she herself is restrained by the aura's power and cannot move freely. Flamen mocks them, explaining that resisting the aura is pointless. With a smug grin, he calls it one of his favorite RPG mechanics, a scripted event. The twins keep walking closer and closer to him, trembling, their faces twisted in fear. They glance back at Isla, silently begging her to save them because they do not want to die. The sight of their fear cuts Isla deeply. Summoning every last ounce of strength, she struggles violently against the aura, to the point that her body begins to bleed from the strain. Flamen, however, continues speaking over her effort, taunting her even more. Flamen laughs cruelly, declaring that all of them are fools, deluded into thinking they act by their own free will. His voice rises as he shouts directly at Takuto, claiming he knows Takuto is out there watching. He mocks him, insisting that his biggest mistake was underestimating him, and vows to kill Takuto's most precious citizens as the ultimate act of spite. Immediately after his words, a massive explosion erupts, engulfing everything in fiery light. The scene then shifts to a memory of the past. Maria and Karia are climbing the trunk of a tall tree, their eyes sparkling with excitement. When they reach the top, the world of Managra stretches below like a breathtaking tapestry. From this high vantage point, they can see the entire civilization in all its beauty. As they admire the view, the clouds slowly shift and the moon comes into sight. Silver moonlight spills across the land, bathing Minagra in a glow that makes it appear almost otherworldly. The twins can't help but smile as they take it all in. Maria gently takes Korea's hand, and with soft determination, they promise each other that next time, they will bring Isla here too, because she deserves to see this view just as much as they do. But that promise fades in an instant. Suddenly, Maria and Korea awaken inside a massive crater, the aftermath of the explosion still lingering around them. At first, they are relieved to be alive. Relief quickly turns to horror when they turn and see Isla. Her body has been torn apart while shielding them from the blast. With a weak, fading voice, Isla calls out to them, asking if they are all right. Her lips curve into a faint smile when she sees they survived. The twins, however, are overwhelmed with worry and rush to her side. Korea insists that they must get her back to Minagra immediately. She tries contacting Takuto through shared perception, but there is no response. Why now? Of all times, why is Takuto not answering? Isla draws their attention, urging them to listen carefully. She tells them the truth they do not want to hear. It should already be clear that she will not survive. There is something important she needs to entrust to them. The twins immediately protest. They cannot accept this. They shout that there must be some way to save her, anything at all. But Isla shakes her head, whispering that there isn't. Her injuries are far too severe, beyond any hope of repair. Hearing this, Maria and Korea break down. They blame themselves, insisting it is their fault for being too weak to protect her, for not being able to fight by her side. They admit they had grown too comfortable, foolishly allowing themselves to believe they could finally live a happy, peaceful life. They had even started to think of Isla as a mother. All they had wanted was to live together with her in happiness. Why are they being punished with this cruel fate? Despite her pain, Isla comforts them. She assures them they have done nothing wrong. None of this is their fault, it is hers for not being strong enough. But the twins refuse to see it that way. Tears streaming down their faces, they tell Isla they do not want to live without her. If she dies, they would rather die alongside her. In her final moments, Isla makes a shocking move. She plunges her claw into her own chest and pulls out her heart. Blood runs down her arm, but she holds the glowing heart out in front of them. Her voice is filled with sorrow and love as she asks for their forgiveness for dying before them, for leaving them alone. She reminds them that sometimes fate simply cannot be controlled, and this is the cruel reality they have been forced into. With her last strength, she gives them a final request, to eat her heart. By doing so, they will inherit the skill royal succession. The heart pulses with light, glowing brighter and brighter in her palm as Isla declares that she is passing down all of her power to them. Her arm falls, and she collapses to the ground. The heart still glows faintly in her hand as her eyes close peacefully. In that quiet moment, Isla dies. On the battlefield, Isla stands on the front lines as waves of goblins advance. Behind her, Molter keeps pace, his massive footsteps crunching across the blood-stained earth. Isla glances at him with annoyance, telling him there was no reason for him to follow her all the way here. But Molter quickly protests. Takuto himself had ordered Molter to march alongside ATU and assist in destroying the Demon Lord's stronghold, so he had no choice but to comply. ATU brims with irritation but doesn't argue. She knows there is no time to waste, she must end this battle quickly and return to Takuto's side. As the goblins charge forward, ATU lashes out with her tentacles, cutting through the first wave of enemies with brutal efficiency. Just as she prepares to continue the assault, her entire body suddenly freezes. Her eyes widen in shock. She can no longer feel Isla's presence. Her energy is completely gone. That can only mean one thing, Isla is dead. ATU explodes in rage. Her tentacles thrash violently in every direction, tearing through goblins and scattering their corpses across the battlefield. Molter is stunned, unable to understand why she has gone berserk. He calls out, demanding to know what is happening. ATU finally responds, telling him that Isla has been killed. Far away, Takuto feels it too. His face twists in disbelief. Isla's death shouldn't even be possible in this world. He knows Flaman's scripted event mechanic is powerful, but even so, it should never have been usable here. Desperately, Takuto checks his inventory to confirm whether Isla is truly gone. Moments later, a system message appears. Isla's presence can no longer be detected. The words crush him. Takuto falls to his knees. The very idea of Isla being erased from existence is something he had never imagined possible. Meanwhile, back in the crater, Maria and Korea honor Isla's final wish. With tears streaming down their cheeks, they consume her heart. A radiant glow bursts from within them as Isla's power floods their bodies. They have inherited her strength. A few minutes later, the shared perception link reconnects. Takuto wastes no time. His voice cracks as he informs ATU of Isla's death, explaining the horrors of her final moments. Hearing this, ATU's chest tightens with guilt. She recalls the time she noticed Ice Rock using an RPG mechanic but failed to report it. If she had spoken up, Isla might have been more cautious, maybe she wouldn't have ended up dead. Through the telepathic link, ATU tells Takuto she will return to Minagra immediately. Isla's death isn't just a personal loss, it's a national emergency. She turns to leave, preparing to abandon the battlefield, but Takuto stops her. He explains that although Isla died, the twins survived. Right now, they are moving south, straight toward the enemy's stronghold. From what Takuto can see, it looks like they intend to avenge Isla's death. ATU clenches her fists, insisting it's impossible. The twins are far too weak to take on such an enemy. But Takuto interrupts her, revealing that before Isla died, she used the royal succession technique. Maria and Korea now carry her hero status within them. Takuto tells ATU they cannot afford to lose any more hero units at this stage. Her orders are simple, she must head to the battlefield and retrieve Maria and Korea immediately. ATU's face twists with frustration. She protests, begging Takuto to reconsider. The RPG mechanics they've encountered are far too dangerous. If the twins run into another one of those scripted events, their lives could end instantly. She doesn't want Takuto to gamble with them. Despite her protests, she bows her head and obeys. Takuto was once the greatest player of Eternal Nations. If anyone can make the right call in a crisis like this, it's him. ATU swallows her doubts and follows his orders, clinging to the hope that everything will work out. Meanwhile, Takuto receives reports from Gia and Emil. They inform him that they are nearly done mopping up the enemy survivors who dared to invade their land. On top of that, they've already evacuated all non-combatants and plan to begin repairs on the damaged facilities by tomorrow morning. But Takuto interrupts, telling them not to act on their own. From now on, he will personally issue every order at the necessary time. Gia and Emil glance at each other, unsettled. This isn't like Takuto at all. His usual style is to trust his commanders with initiative, yet now, he is tightening his grip completely. Elsewhere, Maria walks with an expressionless face across the battlefield until she arrives at the base of Lady Wind, one of the 4 demon generals. Lady Wind sneers at the sight of her, laughing at the absurd idea that a mere child could confront her alone. But Maria lifts her gaze. Her left eye glows bright red, radiating unnatural power. Just as Lady Wind's soldiers move in to eliminate Korea, Maria unleashes a wave of dark energy that bursts out, casting the entire squad into a trance-like state. They freeze, unable to resist. Korea speaks bitterly, admitting that she always knew something terrible would happen if they put their faith in anyone else. She should never have relied on hope at all. Lady Wind's arrogance begins to waver. Panic flickers in her eyes as she realizes how effortlessly Korea neutralized her entire unit. Desperate, she summons a powerful gust of wind and hurls it at Korea, but Korea nullifies it effortlessly. Then Lady Wind gasps, her palm, her skin, her entire body begins to melt. She collapses to the ground, screaming and begging for mercy. But Korea shows no reaction. She simply watches. Meanwhile, Maria finds herself surrounded by the enemy's top military units. Soldiers fire their strongest magic at her, but Maria spins gracefully, laughing as she blocks each attack like a child playing a game. One soldier calls for Magitech, the men in the massive iron battle suit. Realizing Maria's power, Magitech activates his suit's full combat mode. The iron giant roars to life, bristling with weapons. But before he can move, Maria smirks and snaps her fingers. Instantly, the robot's suit shuts down. The mage squad collapses uselessly, and Magitech himself freezes in confusion. None of them can function anymore. Maria takes a playful bite of the air. That simple gesture creates a razor-sharp slash that cuts through the Earth Mage squad instantly. She takes another bite, and the force shreds Magitech's armored suit into pieces. Now exposed, Magitech grovels on the floor, trembling in terror. Maria strolls toward him slowly, her lips curling into a twisted smile, and without hesitation, she finishes him off. When the massacre is over, the twins walk calmly away from the battlefield, their footsteps echoing in the silence left behind. Suddenly, a system message appears before them, marking the twins as the third-degree threat in this world. They even receive a title, the Witches of Regret. The other player from this world, a middle-aged man with blonde hair, fixes his sharp gaze on Maria and Korea as they approach. He wonders how fragile-looking children like them could possibly reach the same level of strength he has. To him, it feels as if fate itself is mocking him, and that is why he has decided to end everything here and now. Once he destroys everything and sacrifices the entire world, he believes he will finally obtain freedom, as per the pact he made with God. Before beginning the battle, the man asks them a question, whether they believe in the existence of God. The sisters reveal their glowing red eyes and, without hesitation, declare that such a thing does not exist. In response, the Demon Lord quickly places a powerful barrier around himself. But to his shock, the twins shatter it almost instantly. He is stunned because only the chosen hero should have the power to destroy that barrier. According to his agreement with the gods, the chosen hero was never supposed to exist in this world. So, how can there now be someone capable of breaking through his defenses? The twins remain silent. They don't answer his confusion and calmly continue walking toward him, prepared to fight. The Demon Lord then mutates into a grotesque beast, his body sprouting countless swords from his back like jagged spines. In this monstrous form, his confidence swells, certain that the two girls cannot possibly stop him. With arrogance, he launches the swords at them in a deadly volley. Yet, Maria does not flinch, her face carrying nothing but a confident, almost playful smile. She halts every single sword in midair, effortlessly stopping the Demon Lord's attack. Maria calls upon her magic, forcing the beast deep into the ground. With the enemy restrained, the twins seize a sword lying on the field and charge forward together. The Demon Lord tries to strike back, but Korea meets him head-on, and with a single swing of her blade, she destroys his arm completely. The force of the strike disintegrates half of his monstrous body. Yet, even in this desperate and ruined state, the Demon Lord refuses to surrender. His determination to honor his pact with God and claim peace and freedom drives him to keep fighting. The twins, however, only laugh at his desperation. They taunt him, insisting there is no such thing as God. Maria goes further, warning that believing someone will come to save you only leads to disappointment, a lesson they learned painfully from Isla. But then, to their surprise, the Demon Lord is suddenly healed. His wounds vanish in an instant, granted by the god he serves. Overjoyed, he prepares to speak his god's name in gratitude. But before he can utter a word, his body is sliced clean in half by an unexpected third party. The twins turn toward the stranger who interfered, demanding to know who he is and why he chose to intervene. The man calmly explains that he thought it looked like they needed help, so he decided to step in. Korea narrows her eyes, warning him seriously that his help was neither wanted nor necessary. The man raises his hands in defense, insisting he has no intention of fighting them. He even tries to lighten the mood, commenting that they look cuter when they're not angry, but smugly adds that they wouldn't stand a chance against him anyway, as they are far too weak at their current level. The twins glare back. They do not care what he says. This is the men who ruined their chance at atoning for Isla, and for that, he must pay. Fueled by fury, they leap into the air, ready to strike him down. But before they can land their blow, Atu suddenly appears, freezing their feet in place with her magic. She informs them that Takuto has given direct orders for them to return immediately, as their mission has already been accomplished. The twins shake their heads, refusing to comply. They argue that they still have unfinished business with the men who interfered. Atu, however, reminds them that Takuto's orders are not optional. To disobey him is unthinkable. Yet the sisters declare that they are no longer acting under Takuto's command. All that matters to them now is avenging Isla. Hearing this, Atu prepares to discipline them herself, determined to show the consequences of defying their king. But the girls push back, recalling Takuto's words that they could do whatever they wanted because they were evil. Yet, as they consider his words more carefully, they remember that he also told them to do whatever would make their mother happy. In that moment, realization strikes. They understand that fighting the men who interfered and making themselves enemies of Managra is not what Isla would have wanted. With heavy hearts, they lower their weapons, apologize sincerely to Atu for their rudeness, and decide to hold back. Atu accepts their apology, telling them she is willing to let it go this time. The man who intervened also offers his own apology for butting in before quickly disappearing from the scene. Atu watches him leave and notices something odd. He was wearing a school uniform. If he truly is the person Takuto suspects, it is best to leave him be, at least for now. Afterward, the twins ask Atu if there is any chance that Isla might ever be resurrected. Sadly, Atu tells them resurrection is impossible. The answer breaks their hearts, and the sisters collapse into grief, crying for their loss. Atu prepares a report for Takuto, informing him that they are on their way back. Takuto responds with a blessing, wishing them a safe journey home. In the meantime, Takuto begins to realize something troubling. The mechanics of a 4X strategy game apply to this world as well. Until now, Takuto had been under the impression that only cheat skills were at play. But it was now clear that enemies were using RPG-style systems of their own. Worse still, countless game genres exist, meaning the possibilities for new threats are endless. Elsewhere, the mysterious man who had cut down the Demon Lord makes his way through the valley. Exhausted, he falls to his knees, trembling as he recalls how terrifying his encounter with Atu and the twins had been. He curses the god who brought him to this world, remembering how he was deceived. The god had told him that two beautiful girls were in danger, and all he had to do was save them. But the truth was nothing like what he expected. The girls turned out to be monsters in disguise. As he curses, a girl approaches him. His slave walks to his side and greets him warmly, addressing him as her master. She explains that the god has apologized for bringing him to this world by accident. The man grits his teeth and curses the god again, convinced this was no accident at all but a deliberate trick. After all, the only reason he ended up here in the first place was because of that god and his fateful encounter with Truck-kun. Still, despite his frustration, he admits there is at least one blessing. He has a cute slave he can now call his own. As they talk, a massive ogre suddenly appears behind him. Without even breaking a sweat, he cuts it down instantly, destroying it in record time. His overwhelming strength is all thanks to the cheat abilities granted to him by the god he despises, and for that, he feels at least a little grateful. His slave is left in awe of his true power. With renewed confidence, the men and the girl walk onward together, vowing to give saving this world a try. Meanwhile, in the ruins of the town, Ira has just been resurrected for the 19th time. The priest who has been battling her is left completely dumbfounded. She had incinerated Ira's body to ashes and even sealed it with powerful magic, yet Ira stands again, as if nothing had ever happened. Despite her confusion, the priest steels herself. She knows it is her sacred duty as a priest to vanquish Ira, no matter how many times it takes. Elsewhere, a die is tossed into a bowl, and in the next instant, the priest is struck down in a single blow. Ira herself is startled to see the priest fall so suddenly, but instead of dwelling on it, she mocks her. She taunts that it has been a long and tiresome struggle having to deal with the priest over and over. After her mockery, Ira raises her gaze to the heavens and begins praising a deity she calls the Dice Master. Back in Managra, Takuto finds himself in a state of deep distress. He realizes that from now on, they will be facing massive enemies who wield all kinds of mechanics and systems far beyond what they had expected if they dare make the same mistakes again. Takuto knows that their nation will be completely annihilated the next time. In frustration, he slams his fist against the floor with all his strength. The sheer force shatters the ground beneath him, causing him to fall straight through. As he rises back up, Takuto is struck by a revelation. The damage he caused wasn't due to the floor being weak, it was from his own overwhelming strength. Curious, he decides to test this newfound power. He throws a single punch at a tree, and to his amazement, the tree shatters instantly. Only now does he realize that all along he himself has been an attack unit, though he never once considered it. This discovery does not bring him joy. Instead, it fills him with regret. If only he had realized his potential sooner, perhaps Isla would still be alive today. Later that day, ATU and the others return from their mission, and an emergency meeting is called. The main issue at hand is the twins' insubordination. Everyone expects harsh punishment to be declared, but to their shock, Takuto surprises them. He calmly announces that the twins will face no punishment whatsoever. ATU, unable to accept this, protests. She argues that if their nation shows such leniency, they will lose the ability to discipline anyone, and chaos will follow. But Takuto insists that he is the one who should be apologizing. Then, in front of everyone, he bows deeply. ATU and the Dark Elves look on in disbelief. Never in their lives did they think a king like Takuto would lower his head in apology. Afterward, Takuto makes a bold declaration. He promises that Isla will be brought back to life. ATU immediately objects, insisting that it is impossible to resurrect a hero while their nation remains in its current weakened state. But Takuto refuses to back down. He doesn't care how impossible it sounds. What matters to him is that Isla is revived, that the world is restored, and that the loved ones who were torn apart are reunited again. He recalls that this was the very promise he made during the Ascension victory. If this world truly follows the Eternal Nation system, Takuto believes with absolute certainty that they will be able to claim victory and make that promise a reality. But ATU strongly protests, warning that Takuto's plan is not practical. She explains that an Ascension victory means rewriting the world itself, and if he chooses to go through with it, the entire world will inevitably turn against him. Takuto, however, simply brushes aside her concern. He declares that he does not care because he will personally kill anyone who dares to stand in their way. As he speaks, a dark aura surrounds his body, radiating overwhelming pressure. He admits that the path ahead will be filled with hardship, but he is certain they can overcome it as long as everyone follows his orders exactly. Later that night, while Takuto is occupied making plans for future battles and defenses, the Dark Elves gather to hold a small funeral for Isla. The atmosphere is heavy, and most are drowning in sorrow. Yet, in the middle of the morning, the twins step forward. They boldly tell everyone not to be sad, reminding them that Takuto himself promised to bring Isla back. Their words, however, do little to restore hope. The others, still shaken by their recent losses, have lost much of their confidence. Many quietly wonder if they will even be able to keep up with Takuto's ambitious plans. Hidden in the shadows of the bushes, Takuto secretly watches the scene unfold. He sees their hesitation and doubts, but just then, the twins once again raise their voices, encouraging everyone not to lose faith so easily. They urge them to hold on to their confidence, to believe in King Takuto, and not to throw away their trust in him. Their words give the grieving elves a sudden boost of morale, surprising them. None of them ever imagined they would receive encouragement from children. From his hiding place, Takuto watches with quiet pride, his heart swelling at the loyalty of the twins. The next day, Atu walks into the throne room, only to find an unexpected sight. Takuto is in the middle of an emotional breakdown. The twins are at his side, consoling him as tears flow down his face. Takuto confesses that he feels terrible about losing control the previous day, admitting that he had scared everyone and let his emotions get the better of him. The twins pat him gently on the head, reassuring him that it is all right. They suggest that perhaps if he rephrases his words, he might feel better. Wiping his eyes, Takuto steadies himself and speaks again, this time with determination. He declares that he will never let down the people who believe in him and that together they will work toward achieving the Ascension victory. Atu and the others are moved by his sincerity. Hearing this renewed vow from their king, they rally behind him once more, vowing to follow him to the very end. Takuto lifts his head with confidence. In his heart, he knows he will be the one to claim victory in the end. After all, he is the original Eternal Nations player, the one destined to outlast them all.